Chapter 343. When Itachi said that he was still a woodleaf ninja Itachi Uchiha, Nangongja could easily perceive that Itachi's whole spirit had changed. Although he was also born in woodleaf, but compared to Nangongja who was born and raised in woodleaf, he couldn't understand the pride of being a woodleaf ninja. But not understanding doesn't mean that Nangongja has any prejudice against such a Itachi Uchiha. On the contrary, Nangongja appreciated this kind of Itachi very much. Because Itachi's almost blind loyalty to woodleaf is actually the same as Nangongja's unconditional protection and trust for his family. Little Linger, Mashiro, and Nangong-ro are Nangongja's spiritual sustenance, and woodleaf is naturally Itachi's spiritual sustenance. In the end, Nangongja and Itachi are somewhat similar in some aspects. This is one of the reasons why the two still cooperate very smoothly even though they don't have a deep friendship. Speaking of Akatsuki. Have you started the operation against Bijou again during this time? I also know that this matter involves Bijou, so I must ask you to meet me in person. Bijou is really a sensitive matter. Nangongja looked at Itachi and finally asked his question. For the ninja world, Bijou is no different from a strategic resource. Just like the nuclear weapons between various countries, it is a weapon full of deterrence. After all, as long as column force doesn't reveal the aura of Bijou in his body, almost no one can detect it. Once a war breaks out, Bijou column force can easily sneak into the strategic towns of other countries and directly release the power of Bijou in his body to wreak havoc. After that, Chakra can directly put away the Bijou and leave easily. And the Akatsuki organization's desire for Bijou is much more than those countries and villages. Not to mention anything else, would anyone stand against Konoha just because they want to take the Kyubi into their own hands? If it was someone else, perhaps everyone would raise their middle finger and praise them as idiot, but Akatsuki really did so, and even caused a lot of damage to the woodleaf. The Akatsuki has taken action against the tailed beasts? After hearing Nangongja's words, Itachi didn't react for a while. As soon as he saw Itachi's reaction, Nangongja knew that Itachi didn't know about this operation. Therefore, Nangongja told him about the crazy man he met when he went to Little Linger's hometown. Floating in the air. Attacking with a wave of his hand. Striking hair color. Itachi began to recite the main points of the characteristics that Nangongja had mentioned. His eyes also began to slowly turn piercingly cold. Sure enough. This person isn't an ordinary person in the Akatsuki organization. If you are sure that the crazy man you just said is the truth. In the Akatsuki organization, there is only one person who fits the characteristics you just described, and that is the leader of the organization, God Pain. This person's identity is also very suspicious. In the information you gave me before, there are 3 founding elders of Akatsuki, Nagato, Yahiko, and Konan. This Pain who has always been the leader of Akatsuki is very similar to the description you gave me about Yahiko, but you and I both know that as the original leader of Akatsuki, Yahiko has already died in the hands of Shimura Danzo and Hanzo the Salamander. On the contrary, the person named Nagato has never appeared in front of me, which makes me very confused. Nagato. Yahiko. Pain. Nangongja suddenly felt that he seemed to have touched upon a very interesting truth, and looking at Itachi's appearance, it was obvious that he had some doubts. In that case, it seems that the Akatsuki organization has been hiding from you to drive away the tailed beast to a certain extent. From your description, it is naturally not difficult to analyze that this person named Pain has the ability to fight the tailed beast alone, and from the words of the survivor, we can also know that this Sanbai Isabu is actually being chased away. So, can we assume that defeating the tailed beast is not Pain's goal, but more likely, he wants to drive the Sanbai to a place where he can effectively monitor it? The Sanbai itself is now in a wild state, and as the Akatsuki organization who is interested in collecting tailed beasts, it may be because of various reasons that they can't directly capture the Sanbai, but they also hope that this target can always be in their sight and easily controlled. And the Sanbai is an extremely lazy creature. Once it starts to live in a place, as long as there is enough food and no one disturbs it, it can always live in one place. So, what Pain wants to do is naturally simple, that is, to set off alone, so that those who monitor the Akatsuki organization can't discover his actions, and then use his own power to forcibly drive the sandbai away from its habitat, and along the way, choose a remote place as the route to drive the sandbai away. The village that Little Ling originally lived in was located in a remote area. The village was surrounded by dense forests, which naturally met Pain's requirements. Little Linger's village suffered an unexpected disaster, and became a small and insignificant sacrifice in Pain's action. Nangongja doesn't know Pain, but Itachi is in the Akatsuki organization, so naturally, he has some understanding of Pain's philosophy. Pain has always claimed that his actions are for the eternal peace of the shinobi world, although he doesn't know what Pain is going to do, but from what Nangongja said, it is naturally not difficult to judge that Pain actually doesn't care so much about the lives of ordinary people. Itachi. Nangongja was silent for a long time, and finally said to Itachi Uchiha, although we don't know the specific plan of the Akatsuki organization, but Tailed Beast must be an important part of it. So I hope you can try to find out where Pain is keeping the sandbai in captivity, since it is the target of his own surveillance, he will naturally send people to monitor it. Once there is a transfer of personnel, there is naturally no way to completely hide it. I need you to help me find out all the useful information. Itachi heard Nangongja's words, and also nodded very seriously. Nangongja actually just wants to make things difficult for the Akatsuki organization, so he hopes that he can destroy their plan of keeping the sandbai in captivity. And Itachi is concerned about the huge ambition of the Akatsuki organization, he hopes that he can stop the Akatsuki organization from carrying out such a crazy plan. Obviously, they have different starting points, but they are on the same path. In this way, it is very interesting. Chapter 344. Whether it was Itachi or Nangongja, they were very concerned about finding the sandbai's habitat and destroying the Akatsuki's plan. With the information provided by Itachi and the cooperation of many disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, they were gradually able to narrow down the sandbai's location to a certain extent. Originally, the sandbai was sealed in the body of the Woodleaf Shinobi, Harano Rin, by the Mist Shinobi. They hoped that with her special physique, the sandbai could wreak havoc in the Woodleaf area, but they were stopped by Kakashi. The sandbai was severely injured because of Rin's death. After that, the first trace of the sandbai was found in a small country called the Country of Bears between the Water Country and the Country of Fire. In order to make it easier for them to monitor the sandbai, the Rain Village must have placed the sandbai in a relatively close position. The sandbai itself is of the water attribute, and has a different affinity and dependence on water. Therefore, the only places suitable for the sandbai's survival and close to the Akatsuki's sphere of influence are the Country of River, the Country of Waterfall, and the Country of Rain where the Akatsuki is located. Since the Akatsuki wasn't so eager to deal with the sandbai, and even spent so much effort to expel the sandbai from a remote place, it's very likely that the sandbai wasn't confined in the Country of Rain. Therefore, Nangongja and Itachi focused their investigation on the Country of River and the Country of Waterfall. When a large number of people are scattered, no matter how secretly the Akatsuki mobilizes people, they will still be exposed. Gradually, Nangongja and Itachi were able to determine that the sandbai was most likely hidden in the Country of Waterfall. First of all, the Country of Waterfall is rich in rainfall, and there are many swamps and lakes. Compared to the Country of River, the Country of Waterfall is undoubtedly more suitable for the sandbai's long-term habitat. Second, there is the Country of Grass between the Country of Waterfall and the Country of Rain. Even if someone found the whereabouts of the sandbai, they would only think that it was done by the neighboring countries, such as the Country of Grass, Country of Frost, Country of Fire, and Country of Earth. They wouldn't put their eyes on a powerful force like the Akatsuki. After arranging some matters, Nangongja left Woodleaf Village and headed towards the Waterfall Country. Along the way, Nangongja used his leg strength to the extreme. From the Woodleaf in the hinterland of the Land of Fire to the Land of Waterfall, it only took him 3 days and 2 nights to cover a quarter of the distance of the shinobi world. The waterfall country was a country with a lot of water, so there weren't many tall trees. Instead, there were many shorter shrubs. After walking for a while, they could clearly hear the sound of flowing spring water. At this moment, Nangongzhi didn't care about the dew on the shrubs. He just laid down in the shrubs and carefully observed the hidden tent in front of him. This camp was built based on the surrounding terrain and plants. Almost 3/4 of it was hidden in the soil, rocks, and trees, while the remaining 1/4 was carefully concealed by someone. If it was really a hurried glance, it would be really difficult to find the clues. Nangongzhi also noticed by chance that something was wrong here. At the same time, there was a very large deep pool near the camp, so Nangongzhi decided to lurk in this place and carefully observe where the people came from. Just after Nangongzhi lurked in the shrubs for 2 hours, finally, a figure gradually walked into this very hidden tent. Just as this figure was about to approach the hidden tent, suddenly from 2 slightly dark corners, a figure with an amigakure forehead appeared. Others don't know, but how could Nangongzhi not know that the amigakure has long been controlled by the Akatsuki? These ninjas with the amigakure forehead are members of the Akatsuki. Nangongzhi believed that in this hidden camp, there must be detailed information about Isabu. If he could obtain such information, then it would be more feasible to destroy Akatsuki organization's captive breeding plan. After all, for everyone, tailed beast, this kind of creature was still in a kind of half-understood state. If he can get the research information about the Sanbai, then naturally, it will save a lot of unnecessary trouble, so why not? Therefore, in order to ensure that the information he wants to get is not destroyed by these ninjas, Nangongzhi decided to assassinate these ninjas of the amigakure. Looking at the ninja who seemed to come to report entered the tent after a series of checks, Nangongzhi also observed a little bit of movement in many hidden places. If it is an ordinary person, it is naturally difficult to detect the reason, but Nangongzhi is an experienced ninja, so it is easy to judge that these places are the distribution of some hidden sentries. Nangongzhi quietly pulled out the sword behind his back from the scabbard. The dark sword ridge reflected Nangongzhi's cold face. At this moment, his face has slowly emerged with a somewhat cruel smile, as if he is very excited about being able to freely hunt. If other people saw this, they will be instantly creeped out. Under the effect of exquisite movements, Nangongzhi's figure instantly disappeared from the place. At this moment, Nangongzhi's figure has quietly appeared in the most remote sentry post from the camp. It was similar to an ordinary sentry post. In order to prevent a person from being distracted sometimes, there are 2 ninjas in this sentry post to take care of each other. Nangongzhi's figure has quietly appeared behind the 2 ninjas. Obviously, he walked step by step into the hidden sentries, but the 2 ninjas completely seem to be unaware of anything, still staring at the area they are monitoring. At this moment, a faint layer of bloody brilliance covered Nangongzhi's sword at the moment. This bloody brilliance is another application of his murderous aura that Nangongzhi explored. Then, when the sword cut into the enemy's flesh, he could directly let his killing intent enter the enemy's body, instantly suppressing all of the enemy's movements. Even if the enemy died, it would be difficult for the enemy to let out a scream. This kind of move is suitable for assassination. There will not be the slightest movement that should not appear. Moreover, the murderous aura wrapped by his internal force is also extremely difficult to detect. For a place like this, it is impossible for Akatsuki to send their own Kage-level powerhouse to guard. After all, if such a powerhouse is sent out, it is impossible to hide it from Itachi. Chapter 345. Blood was quietly spilled on the ground. Nangongzhi has basically eliminated all the sentries outside the Akatsuki's camp, only the main personnel in the big tent needs to be dealt with. Nangongzhi also carefully observed whether there were enchantments set up around the camp. Sure enough, there were some simple and easy to operate enchantments to locate the enemy. Nangongzhi has not seen 1,000 of such barriers, but he has seen at least 800 of them. There is really nothing new about them. After a little bit of movement on several important nodes, a loophole easily appeared on the barrier. Through this loophole, Nangongzhe was finally able to see the whole picture of the camp. There are nearly 20 large and small tents in this camp, and roughly estimated that there are at least 100 ninjas in it. Among these people, except for the 20 ninjas he just killed in the periphery and the ninjas who were responsible for observing the Sanbai, Nangongzhe estimated that there should be about 50 ninjas in this camp. Nearly 100 ninjas, even if a large part of them are genin and chunin, it's already a huge force for an ordinary ninja village, but Akatsuki can directly place such a force directly here to keep an eye on the Sanbai. On the one hand, it is naturally because the Sanbai is very important to Akatsuki, and on the other hand, isn't it because Akatsuki is rich and doesn't mind such a force being idle? Still, according to his previous plan, as much as possible, silently kill the ninjas of Akatsuki, not giving them the opportunity to destroy the information, so as to find a way to destroy their captive plan. Nangongzhe quietly entered a tent, using his woodleaf White Fang's assassination method, and constantly killing the ninjas in it, and Nangongzhe was also very careful to control the amount of blood he killed, making the smell of blood as vague as possible. In such a big tent, generally the weaker people were placed in the periphery, and the stronger people were placed in the middle. Nangongzhe also followed such an experiment, and began to eliminate these ninjas of Akatsuki organization in a circle as if he was peeling silk from a cocoon. With the passage of time, Nangongzhe's assassination target is also getting stronger and stronger. In order to achieve his goal, Nangongzhe's killing frequency has also begun to sharply decrease. Nangongzhe at this moment can clearly feel that his physical strength and spirit have reached an extremely exhausted state. Such a high-intensity assassination can no longer continue like this. Combined with the general strength of the ninjas he killed in this big tent, Nangongzhe believes that there are at most 3 Jonin ninjas in this big tent. As an internal energy practitioner who can restrain chakra to a certain extent, and his strength has also reached Kage level, at this time, perhaps the most effective way to quickly kill these ninjas of Akatsuki is to directly go out and use his most proficient posture to quickly kill these ninjas of Akatsuki. After thinking for a little bit, Nangongzhe finally decided to directly go all out to kill all the remaining ninjas of Akatsuki. After all, the reason why he chose to assassinate just now is to let those ninjas in the periphery have no time to inform the ninjas in the big tent to destroy the key information. Now that he has almost killed all the ninjas of the periphery, naturally there is no need to worry about this aspect, so why should he use a method that he is not so proficient in to carry out this kind of mission? So, Nangongzhe finally came out from the shadows. His black clothes fluttered without wind, his black hair wantonly fluttered, but what is more conspicuous is still Nangongzhe's pair of bright eyes and the dark simple long sword in his hand. A kind of surging momentum was born from Nangongzhe's body, just like the center of a tornado, calmly standing in the same place, but the surrounding tents of Nangongzhe because of the storm formed by Nangongzhe's momentum. For a long time, unexpectedly no one came out from the central tent. Nangongzhe's heart also began to be vigilant. This situation is not what he expected. After all, Nangongzhe is not a professional perception ninja, although Nangongzhe can do this kind of thing, but he is not so proficient in it. When he found that the rest of the ninjas in the big tent all gathered to fight with him as he imagined, Nangongzhe also immediately became vigilant, directly unsheathing the Heaven's Disaster sword in his hand and walked towards the biggest tent in the big tent. Using his scabbard to lift the curtain of the tent, Nangongzhe only saw a strangely dressed person sitting on the table of the main tent, one foot on the table, the other foot was hanging in the air casually swinging. Nangongzhe saw this strange person, and this strange person naturally also saw Nangongzhe. He seemed to be a little surprised as he stretched out his finger towards Nangongzhe, and the face covered by the mask with only one hole impressively revealed a 3-tomo Sharingan. A member of the Uchiha clan? Nangongzhe immediately judged the possible identity of this person in front of him, but he instantly denied his opinion. After all, the Uchiha clan has been exterminated, and he knows the survivors. Whether it is the figure or the posture of this guy, he is not familiar with the few people he is familiar with. In the wood leaf, there is also Kakashi, who is obviously not a member of the Uchiha clan, but still has a Sharingan, isn't it? Who are you? Nangongzhe looked at the person in front of him with a mask, a black robe, and a head of pineapple-like hair. But this person seems to have not heard Nangongzhe's question and the murderous intent contained in it, but directly jumped up from the table he was sitting on. He directly trotted to Nangongzhe's side, and at the moment, the 3 Tomo Sharingan swept over Nangongzhe's body and face, and even praised from time to time. Isn't this the famous Yama of the Woodleaf Ninja world? It's rare, I didn't expect to meet such a famous person in this boring mission, it's really a pleasant surprise. Wait a minute, can I ask you to give me an autograph? After saying that, this guy actually seemed to be fumbling all over his body to find a pen and paper for Nangongzhe to sign. Nangongzhe was already somewhat angry because of the previous slaughter, and now seeing this strange guy's appearance in front of him, he was too lazy to suppress the anger in his heart for a while, and directly took out his tribulation sword and directly pierced the guy's chest. Chapter 346. The moment the Heaven's Calamity sword pierced through the strange person in front of him, Nangongzhe immediately pulled his sword out of the person's chest. He even exerted force with his feet and jumped back to distance himself from this strange person. Why? That was because Nangongzhe's sword, which had clearly hit its target, did not feel real at all when it pierced into the man's body. But Nangongzhe could clearly perceive that the man in front of him wasn't an illusion, but a real existence. Regardless of whether this ability was a Kekkei Genkai or a unique ninjutsu, the most important thing to do now was to open up the distance between them. You? Who are you? Nangongzhe looked at the strange man and asked the same question. However, compared to his disdainful tone at the beginning, Nangongzhe's tone had become more serious. Tisk. It was obvious that the masked man was very displeased with Nangongzhe's attitude. I thought that the Yama King of Konoha would be a little more interesting, but I didn't expect him to be so boring. Do you want to know who I am? It doesn't matter if I tell you, this uncle is called Hoodlum. Akatsuki's first official member candidate. Hearing Hoodlum's words, Nangongzhe actually didn't believe him. After all, through Itachi's information, Nangongzhe already knew what kind of people the Akatsuki's official members were. Except for Conan and Pain who hadn't shown their full strength, the other official members were indeed talented in various aspects. To a certain extent, they could also be comparable to Kage-level experts. Even if they had the advantage, they still had the opportunity to defeat Kage-level experts. And this hoodlum in front of him clearly had the ability to let attacks pass through his body without causing any harm. Although he couldn't see for the time being whether this ability could let all physical and energy pass through his body, and what was the limit of this ability. But in Nangongzhe's opinion, a person with this kind of ability was fully qualified to become an official member of the Akatsuki, and not like what Hoodlum said, he was only a first official member candidate. But even in the face of such a strange ability, Nangongzhe didn't intend to shrink back. In the past few days, Nangongzhe also found that his behavior was becoming more and more unlike what he should be doing. Perhaps it was because of the expulsion of Danzo from Konoha, or perhaps it was because he let his 3 family-like existences leave the Bloodcloak Pavilion and the Lion Clan space that he felt was very safe. Therefore, Nangongzhe hoped that he could save his own life and the lives of his family. Due to various reasons, Nangongzhe also clearly sensed that he was beginning to weaken. The iron-blooded Yama who made people tremble in fear on the battlefield back then seemed to have quietly changed at this moment. His heart that was as hard as iron had actually begun to slowly melt. Nangongzhe tightly held the Heaven's Calamity sword in his hand. This time, he wanted to try and change it. Seemingly aware of the change in Nangongzhe's mentality, Hoodlum, who looked very sloppy just a moment ago, also slowly straightened his slightly bowed body. One of his hands also slowly pulled out a kunai from his back, one hand holding the kunai, while the other hand pressed on the kunai in his hand. Obviously, he was ready to fight. To be honest. Although you have always been called the Yama of Woodleaf, I still know the relationship between you and Woodleaf. So if possible, I really have no reason to fight with you. As he spoke, Hoodlum glanced at Nan Gongzha's clearly very determined eyes and laughed self-deprecatingly. However, I think that you have already made up your mind to fight with me. There's no point in talking anymore. Let's fight first. As he spoke, Nan Gongzha directly drew his sword and ran towards Hoodlum. Nan Gongzha held the disaster sword with both hands and placed it next to his left ear. The inner strength in his body circulated at high speed, mixing with killing intent and hostility as it wrapped around the disaster sword. There were even strands of undetectable sword chi that wrapped around the disaster sword. Gusts of wind quietly wrapped around Nan Gongzha's body as he ran. Slowly, the wind became stronger and stronger. Regardless of whether it was the surrounding tense curtains or the dust on the ground, they were all blown away by the wind. At this moment, Nan Gongzha was like a ferocious tiger descending from the mountain, or a dragon dancing in the sky. His aura was extremely powerful and domineering. Hoodlum, who was standing opposite of Nan Gongzha, naturally felt it the most. However, he still looked fearless as he quietly watched Nan Gongzha charge towards him. It seemed that no matter how Nan Gongzha prepared to attack him, he wouldn't lose. However, Nan Gongzha wasn't affected by Hoodlum's attitude at all. Instead, he fell into an extremely mysterious state. Back when Nan Gongzha entered the Woodleaf Academy, he relied on a state called Heart Sacrifice Technique to defeat Hatake Kakashi in swordsmanship. He even received Hatake Mao Shuo's favor. However, over the years, it had become increasingly difficult for Nan Gongzha to enter such a state. Today, Nan Gongzha was completely immersed in his sword for the first time in a long time. Ignoring Hoodlum's expression and his surroundings, Nan Gongzha suddenly had a strong desire in his heart. Swing the sword. Swing the sword non-stop. It wasn't to defeat his enemy, nor was it to familiarize himself with swordsmanship. It was purely to swing the sword. That strong desire was like a thirsty person craving for spring water, or a hungry person craving for food. It was a primitive desire that came from his own blood and body. Finally, Nan Gongzha's body was in front of Hoodlum. His own calamity sword could also attack Hoodlum. The desire to swing the sword from the depths of his heart could no longer be suppressed. Hoodlum, who was facing Nan Gongzha, seemed to want to say something, but Nan Gongzha directly slashed his own face. Nan Gongzha wasn't clear about Hoodlum's ability, but Hoodlum was clear about it. The so-called immunity to attacks was actually a transfer of a part of one's body to another space, allowing one's body to avoid being attacked. However, since a part of one's body had been transferred, it naturally wouldn't be able to display its original effect. Therefore, Hoodlum, who was about to speak, could only passively, actively. His words were interrupted. Chapter 347. When Hoodlum saw Nan Gongzha's sword slash across his neck, his throat was transferred to his body. Just as Hoodlum was about to open his mouth to escape, Nan Gongzha directly slashed at his shoulder joint. Nan Gongzha's sword was extremely fast, so Hoodlum could only restrain himself and redirect Nan Gongzha's attack. Limbs, joints, internal organs, and any other fatal or serious weakness of the human body were all attacked by Nan Gongzha's sword. Hoodlum didn't have a chance to speak at all. He could only passively move a part of his body to avoid being hit. Just looking at the Red Heaven's Calamity sword in Nan Gongzha's hand, Hoodlum already felt great pressure. Nan Gongzha, who was frantically swinging his sword, completely ignored Hoodlum's predicament. Instead, he seemed to be enjoying himself. The internal energy and sword energy covering the Heaven's Retribution sword started to dissipate bit by bit, causing the originally ferocious Heaven's Retribution sword to return to its original dark and simple appearance. Although the internal energy and sword energy were dispersed, Hoodlum didn't know why, but he felt that Nan Gongzha's sword had become even more ferocious. The current state of the two of them was extremely comical. Hoodlum was like a wooden puppet, standing in a daze on the spot. Because his joints were constantly being attacked by Nan Gongzha, he couldn't exert any strength. Nan Gongzha's sword was originally very fast, and it was as if the entire sky was filled with the afterimages of his sword. Smoke and dust surged around Nangongzhe, making him look very imposing. But now, it was as if he had lost all of his strength. His sword danced very slowly, but one could faintly see that Nangongzhe's arm had transformed into several afterimages that attacked different parts of Hoodlum's body. As the one being attacked, Hoodlum naturally knew that it wasn't that Nangongzhe's speed had slowed down, but that his speed was too fast. It was beyond the range of what could be seen with the naked eye. The arm and the Heaven's Retribution sword that could be seen with the naked eye were the result of countless afterimages overlapping. Everything seemed to be in a stalemate as time passed minute by minute. Nangongzhe didn't seem to be affected, but Hoodlum didn't seem to be as confident as before. Suddenly, Hoodlum gathered all the chakra that he could control and released it. The shockwave from the chakra forced Nangongzhe back by half a step. Hoodlum also took advantage of this opportunity to absorb his body into a spatial vortex and appear far away from Nangongzhe. Spatial ninjutsu. Previously, Nangongzhe wasn't able to distinguish what kind of ninjutsu Hoodlum used to avoid his attacks. However, after attacking for so long, Nangongzhe was able to detect spatial fluctuations. In order to avoid Nangongzhe's pursuit, Hoodlum skillfully used a spatial ninjutsu that allowed him to appear in another place. More importantly, Nangongzhe wasn't able to discover Hoodlum's method of avoiding his attacks, but he discovered a possible weakness of Hoodlum's ninjutsu. This weakness was very obvious, and that was time. One must know that when Nangongzhe and Hoodlum were fighting just now, the two of them were actually in a strange stalemate. If Hoodlum could continue using his ninjutsu, then he would naturally be able to continue this strange stalemate. However, Hoodlum's mentality began to change, and he seemed to be very unwilling to continue this stalemate. He directly compressed the chakra in his body and released it. Compressing chakra and releasing it wasn't a simple matter. To do so, not only did he have to have extreme control over his own chakra, but he also had to bear the possibility of the violent chakra constantly destroying his body. Although Hoodlum looked calm, Nangongzhe felt that he was just putting up a strong front. It was very likely that Hoodlum's body had already suffered internal injuries. Yama. I know the purpose of your visit, and it's definitely because of the sanbai. Although I don't know what you're trying to do with the sanbai, I don't want to care. Today's battle between you and me can be considered a draw, but in the future, we will naturally have a different victor. After saying that, Hoodlum's figure disappeared from Nangongzhe's vision. 4 minutes 37 seconds. Nangongzhe silently remembered this number in his heart. This was the time it took for Hoodlum to condense chakra and break free from his attacks. Hoodlum's limit must be around this time. This kind of troublesome ability must be treated seriously. Nangongzhe felt that he would definitely have a battle with Hoodlum who belonged to the Akatsuki. After quietly keeping Hoodlum's matter in his heart, Nangongzhe walked to the table where Hoodlum was sitting. He picked up the scroll and hurriedly skimmed through it. After that, he seemed to have found some useful information and began to carefully read it. Outside the Akatsuki's secret camp, Hoodlum and Zetsu were standing together looking at Nangongzhe's camp. Zetsu was puzzled as he asked Hoodlum, "Why didn't you deal with this guy? Although it seemed like you didn't have the strength to retaliate, but I know that as long as you're willing to pay a small price, you can definitely kill this alien ninja who cultivates internal energy. This guy, I feel that we will definitely have to face a formidable opponent in the future." Hoodlum glanced at Zetsu who was standing beside him and said with a bit of ridicule, No, he still has his own value. Our goal has never been to eliminate dissidents, but to collect tailed beasts to complete our plan. Although Nangongzhe is indeed troublesome, but if we look at the long term, we will know that there will definitely be some differences between this Nangongzhe and Windstorm Watergate. Originally, they appear to be united but are actually divided, and it won't be long before they shed all pretense of cordiality. When the time comes, we just have to use a little bit of our methods, and Windstorm Watergate and Nangongzhe will definitely have a battle. The battle between the two of them was also a battle between the Blood-clad Pavilion and Konoha. When the time comes, we will just sit back and reap the benefits. Wouldn't it be more worthwhile than fighting to the death? Finished speaking, Hoodlum directly turned around and didn't look at the dozens of Akatsuki members who had died in the camp. Chapter 348. After reading all the scrolls on the table, Nangongja tried to wander around the tent. Some of the places where Nangongja thought could be used to store confidential documents were also checked by Nangongja one by one, but he still didn't get any valuable information. Tailed beast, for the human race, it was really too strange. Even if the human race didn't know how many times these 9-tailed beasts were sealed in Column Force's body, even in the long river of history, there were many people who achieved perfect compatibility with the tailed beasts in their body, but tailed beasts were still a big mystery. Even the tailed beasts themselves couldn't explain clearly why they were born and why they didn't die out. Although Akatsuki organization targeted tailed beasts, but their research was also extremely deep, and couldn't form any valuable information. Nangongja indeed had some interesting conjectures in the scrolls, but conjectures were after all just conjectures, there was no way to prove it. Dealing with the Sanbai didn't seem to be a simple matter. Nangongja's eyes turned. He hoped that he could think of a way to drive the Sanbai out of here and hide it. In fact, Nangongja could fight with the Sanbai, which was relatively weak among the tailed beasts, and he also had a lot of confidence to kill the Sanbai, but the fact that the tailed beasts were immortal was really meaningless. In here, even if all his hair turned white, it wouldn't have any effect, so it was better to face the tailed beast that he obviously knew a lot about but never faced. From the scroll just now, Nangongja already knew the specific location of the Sanbai, so he didn't encounter any obstacles on the way to find the Sanbai. Along the way, Nangongja also found a lot of subtle traces of ninja activities, but after some analysis, Nangongja already knew that these ninjas who originally stayed here had already retreated. It seems that when the guy called Hoodlum ran away, he also let the Akatsuki ninjas retreat together with him. After walking for a while, Nangongja had already arrived at the side of the deep lake. Perhaps because the lake was too deep, the lake in front of Nangongja actually had a very deep blue-black color. Standing still, Nangongja directly released his internal energy and that surging momentum. He used this method to attract the Sanbai that was hidden in the deep lake. Nangongja's method was obviously very effective. The originally calm lake suddenly turned over a layer of white water, and a turtle shell with sharp spikes slowly floated up from the lake. Slowly, this huge creature revealed its full appearance, with a tortoise-like body and 3 long tails. It was obviously Nangongja's target, Sanbai Isabu. When the Sanbai appeared, its eyes were very fierce. After all, it was previously chased around by a human ninja like a dog. Now that he could finally have a good night's sleep, another human came to his doorstep and released his aura so casually, as if he was afraid that he wouldn't notice him. If this wasn't a provocation, then what was? Sanbai stared intently at the sword in Nangongja's hand. Instinctively, Sanbai felt that this thing, which was so small that it would be disdained to be its toothpick, was emitting a very dangerous feeling at this moment. Nangongja naturally noticed the gaze of the Sanbai, but Nangongja knew in his heart that now is not the time to fight with the Sanbai. His purpose is not to kill the Sanbai, but to let it escape from the control of Akatsuki. Together with the scabbard, Nangongja directly inserted his Heaven's Disaster sword into the slightly soft soil next to the deep lake, then shouted to the Sanbai, "Sanbai, I am not your enemy, I didn't come here to fight with you. As a tailed beast, you should be able to understand my words. Now I put my weapon aside to express my sincerity. I hope that I can have a good talk with you." Sanbai, who has been a Jinchuriki for several generations, naturally understood Nangongja's words. A look of doubt appeared in his eyes at this moment. After all, when humans see a tailed beast, they will either scream and run away, or blindly believe in their own strength and directly fight with the tailed beast. But there has never been a person like Nangongja who directly threw his weapon on the ground, and wanted to have a talk with the tailed beast. Even Column Force, who is connected to the life of a tailed beast, can't do this, right? In the memory of the Sanbai, there was only one person who was so close to it. Among the tailed beasts, the Sanbai itself is the kind of tailed beast with a relatively good character, so at this moment, the Sanbai also used a secret method to let its voice appear in Nangong's mind. Why should I believe you? You humans are all bad, attacking me for no reason. Every time I want to have a good sleep, someone will disturb me. When I was getting along with Yagura, suddenly a human used the same eyes as the old man's to control me and Yagura. I don't want to believe in humans anymore. A slightly immature voice suddenly appeared in Nangong's mind, and the Sanbai in front of him also stared at Nangongja with his big eyes. Obviously, the owner of this voice was the Sanbai. He thought that these tailed beasts were a group of old guys, but he didn't expect the Sanbai to have such a young voice. Should it be said that tailed beasts can't be judged by their appearance? The Sanbai and Nangongja didn't have anything to hide, but they mentioned a lot of interesting things. Yagura is the name of a Mizukage of the Mist. It is said that he is the one who can perfectly use the power of the Sanbai, column force. So it is natural that he and the Sanbai get along well. But there is actually someone who can control the Sanbai and Yagura at the same time? Nangongja doesn't know what kind of genjutsu level is needed to achieve this, but such a person must have reached the pinnacle in genjutsu. Not to mention these things, Nangongja also roughly figured out what kind of character the Sanbai has through the words of the Sanbai. As long as he can appease the Sanbai, it is not impossible to take the Sanbai away from this place where the Akatsuki is monitoring. Chapter 349. My name is Nangongja, and I'm currently a woodleaf ninja. I know you are the Sanbai, so what's your name? Ignoring the Sanbai's childish remarks about humans, Nangongja pointed to himself and introduced himself to the Sanbai, and asked for the Sanbai's name. The Sanbai was also a little confused by Nangongja's behavior for a while, but Nangongja knew very well what he was doing. Since Sanbai could communicate with him normally and had the temperament of a teenager or even a child, Nangongja corrected his attitude and no longer regarded Sanbai as a monster. Instead, he treated Sanbai as a human teenager. For a creature with self-awareness, the only thing that could make one feel happy was the acknowledgement of others, whether it was one's own abilities or some other characteristics. No matter how strange this person's expression was, the happiness in one's heart could not be concealed. Recognition is the most important pursuit of intelligent creatures. Nangongja has always felt that if he wants to truly recognize a person, he naturally has to start by knowing each other's names, so he directly introduced himself to the Sanbai and asked for the Sanbai's name on the way. It turned out that Nangongja's guess was correct. After Nangongja asked for the Sanbai's name, the Sanbai fell into a long silence. The human standing in front of him is somewhat different from the humans he has faced before. Originally, those humans were either full of fear or full of greed for him, but now, the Sanbai can't see any bad intentions from the human in front of him. It's like he really just wants to chat with him here. The Sanbai vaguely remembers when he was young, the old man pointed at him and gave him the name Isabu. Involuntarily, the Sanbai said to Nangongja, "My name is Isabu." Sanbai Isabu. Being able to get an answer from the Sanbai is enough to prove that his current direction is correct. After Nangongja secretly cheered for himself in his heart, he tried his best to make his tone and expression gentle enough, then said to the Sanbai, "Isabu? That's a pretty good name. I didn't come here with any ulterior motives. I came here to help you escape and not be disturbed by those annoying fellows. Are you willing to let me help you?" Isabu himself has the temperament of a teenager. In the face of such a person, he doesn't need to say so many dignified words, as long as he treats him sincerely and says what he wants to say, it will be fine. If he insisted on showing off his eloquence and tried to directly crush his will, it would only backfire. But, I just want to find a place to sleep. Although those people are a little annoying, they still tiptoe around me every time they approach me. I just have to deliberately ignore them and I can have a good sleep. Why do I need your help? Isabu himself is a very lazy-tailed beast. As long as he has the chance, it is not impossible for him to stay in a place for hundreds of years. For such a jealous-tailed beast who is unwilling to move, it is better to let those boring people watch him sleep than to be forced to run around. I know, you don't like to change the place you live, but we have to leave here. Do you still remember the person who forced you to come here? He is the leader of a very powerful organization. I know that this organization is secretly planning a plan that is enough to change the whole world, and you and the other 8-tailed beasts are their target. I know that tailed beasts are immortal, but when you die, you still need some time to recover. The feeling of death must not be that good, right? If you continue to stay here, although you can be free for a while, you won't be able to stay for long. I can help you leave here, and then you can choose a place you like to continue living. Nangongzhi was actually trying to guess Sanbai's thoughts, and then began to persuade Sanbai to leave with him. Such a test directly lets Sanbai know the seriousness of the situation. Sanbai may not care about other things, but it has to take seriously the eyes of the Sage of Six Paths, who is the current holder of the Sage of Six Paths. He has the power of the Sage of Six Paths, but he still wants to collect the 9-tailed beasts. Nangongzhi did not know what would happen, but Sanbai still vaguely felt some instinctive danger in his heart. He can't just sit there and wait for death. Otherwise, the final outcome may be worse than the death that Nangongzhi used to provoke Sanbai. What are you going to do? Sanbai was no longer as timid as before, and he still sounded like a young boy. However, he was also much more serious as he asked Nangongzhi. I have 2 plans. Nangongzhi smiled. He is not afraid that Sanbai will doubt him, but he is afraid that Sanbai will not listen to him at all. Since he has already started talking, there is naturally the possibility of continuing the discussion. First of all, I have the spatial coordinates of a different space. If you want, I can extradite you to my space. Without my permission, no one can go to that space. This is the first option I offer you. When Sanbai heard that Nangongzhi has the spatial coordinates of a different space, there was a very obvious surprise in his eyes, but he immediately shook his head to express his refusal. Tailed beasts themselves are the products of the special space of the ninja world. Once they leave the ninja world, tailed beasts are like trees without roots and water without a source. No matter how strong they are, they will become weak. Although Sanbai is close to Nangongzhi, he is not willing to entrust his life to Nangongzhi. Hearing Sanbai's refusal, Nangongzhi did not show any dissatisfaction. After all, they are discussing it, and it is normal to have objections. In addition to the continent, nearly 1/3 of the ninja world is the ocean. Isabu, you are a water-tailed beast. As long as you want, you can naturally live in the deep sea, and there must be food in the ocean. So I think you can also go to the bottom of the sea and find a place to rest. This way, you don't have to be afraid of people with ulterior motives. What do you think? Chapter 350. From Nangongzhi's point of view, the 2 plans he proposed are very effective and pertinent. The Lion Clan space is not only far away from the shinobi world, but he can also prevent others from entering this space through the Lion Clan, and the sea plan will make it more difficult for the Akatsuki to find the Sanbai. When Nangongzhi confidently told the Sanbai about his 2 plans, the Sanbai still ruthlessly refused. The reason why he can't leave the shinobi world has already been described in the previous article, and we won't repeat it again. The sea is not as calm as it looks. With the countless years of life experience of the Sanbai, doesn't he know that the sea is more suitable for him, and the sea is also a place where he can live safely? Therefore, the Sanbai actually lived in the sea for a period of time before. But in the shinobi world, there are not only ordinary beasts, but also existences beyond the beast that can refine chakra. Compared to the land, the number and ferocity of the creatures in the sea is more unimaginable. The Sanbai is indeed very strong as a bijou, but how can he not know that a group of ants can devour an elephant? I thank you for thinking so much for me, and I can also feel that you really think of a way out for me. But I've never been free. My existence has a mission. Death was scary, but what made me even more upset was that I had to give up my mission because of fear. You don't need to take me out of the shinobi world, nor do you need to cover me to the sea. You just need to find me a place where I can stay. The Sanbai's voice still sounded so young, but it contained the vicissitudes of life accumulated over many years. After taking a deep look at Nan Gongzhe, the Sanbai still seemed to be a little reluctant and said to Nan Gongzhe, "You just said that you have a different space, this is very good. The shinobi world is in chaos, and a different space may be a good shelter. You should take your family to hide in a different space as soon as possible to avoid the disaster." Halfway through its sentence, the voice that was supposed to appear in Nan Gongzhe's mind suddenly stopped when it was about to say something. At this moment, the Sanbai seemed to have suffered a huge injury. It roared loudly at the sky, and its huge body seemed to be rolling around in the pool due to the pain, bringing up huge waves. Nan Gongzhe was puzzled by the Three Tails' words. Nan Gongzhe did not understand the so-called calamity. However, Nan Gongzhe could still understand the current situation. It must have been because some tyrannical existence noticed that Sanbai had said something that it shouldn't have. Hence, it used some means to prevent Sanbai from continuing to speak to him and punished it. Nan Gongzhe tentatively released a little bit of his mental power to the three-tailed beast, hoping to figure out what kind of existence could bully a tailed beast like the three-tailed beast like a stray dog. When the wisp of mental strength was about to reach the Three Tails' forehead, an irresistible force directly erased Nan Gongzhe's mental strength. Nan Gongzhe also looked very pale at the moment because his mental strength was forcibly erased. What kind of power is this? Nan Gongzhe secretly asked himself in his heart, but there was no way to get any answer. Nan Gongzhe had encountered many powerful people and fought many of them. However, this was the first time that Nan Gongzhe felt that he could not win. Even if he used all his means, even if he did not care about the cost, there was no way he could hurt such an existence. And this existence seemed to be able to erase his existence as long as it was unhappy with him. In front of such an existence, Nan Gongzhe was like an ant. Such an existence did not belong to this world at all. This was the only definition that Nan Gongzhe could give to such an existence. The Three Tails' punishment seemed to have ended. The Three Tails, which was still rolling in pain in the pool, had calmed down at this moment. At the same time, Nan Gongzhe slowly recovered from the dizziness caused by the destruction of his mental strength. The Three Tails, which was talking a lot with Nan Gongzhe, did not say a word at this moment. It took a deep look at Nan Gongzhe, who was standing on the shore of the pool, then turned around and dived into the pool. After the Three Tails dived into the pool, mud waves kept churning from bottom to top. Did that existence give the Three Tails a warning not to have too much contact with me and not to tell me more? Nan Gongzhe could only find such a barely justifiable reason for the Three Tails' behavior. Although he was still very unhappy, he could only end it like this. The Three Tails, the unknown powerful existence, the crisis that swept the ninja world, the controlled Yagura and the Three Tails, Nan Gongzhe was only going to disrupt the Akatsuki's plan and vent his anger for little longer, but he didn't expect to come into contact with so many secrets all of a sudden. Gradually, Nan Gongzhe found that he was a little confused about this world. Originally, Nan Gongzhe thought that he had experienced a lot of things in the ninja world and knew a lot of secrets, but now it seems that the water of the ninja world is much deeper than he thought. Then, with his current strength, could he really protect his family? Or do I have to do what the Three Tails said? Once again, for the safety of my family, I have to run into the Lion Clan space and let my family stay there for 3 years, 5 years, or even 10 years? Previously, because of his lack of strength, in order to protect his family, Nan Gongzhe let the 3 girls stay in the Lion Clan space. After so many years, was he still going to bring his family to live in a cold and empty place like the Lion Clan's alternate space without making any progress? At this moment, Nan Gongzhe could only feel an unusual irritation in his heart, the feeling of powerlessness was so strong. Looking at the Heaven's Retribution sword that was inserted in the ground by him, Nangongja slowly walked to its side, grabbed the scabbard, and took the Heaven's Retribution sword in his hand. Although the matter of the three tails can't be said to be perfectly solved, it can be said that the Akatsuki didn't get what they wanted. There is one thing that Nangongja has always been a little bit concerned about, so he decided to return home as soon as possible to solve the doubts in his heart. The water of the deep pool finally returned to its original blue-black color, and the sediment was deposited under the action of time, and everything seems to have returned to normal. No one knew that so many people had died here, and no one knew that an interracial dialogue had taken place here. No one knew that there was an irresistible expert who had once descended his will here. The pool water rippled under the blowing of the wind, and the storm of the ninja world seems to be about to begin. Chapter 351. Unlike before, when he was in a hurry to stop the Akatsuki's captivity plan, Nangongja's speed of returning to the wood leaf could be considered as slow and leisurely. This journey took about a week. Including the time spent on the way up, Nangongja had personally been rushing about for nearly half a month. Rushing about, this was not only a word that Nangongja was most familiar with, it was also a word that Little Linger, Mashiro, and Nangong-ro were all familiar with. This was because Nangongja had practically turned rushing about into a way of life for the few of them to live a stable life. Moreover, this kind of life Nangongja himself was also very happy, because this kind of rushing about was really effective, wasn't it? But because this time Nangongja went out, no one knew what exactly Nangongja was going to do, and also didn't know when exactly Nangongja would return. Therefore, the three girls didn't wait for Nangongja to return like before. After taking off his shoes and neatly placing them at the door, Nangongja hung his coat on the hanger and walked to the living room to pour a cup of water and sat down. When Nangongja returned home, it was already 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. The originally pitch-black sky was slowly illuminated by the brilliance of the sun, but because the sun hadn't completely revealed its appearance, the sky still looked somewhat gloomy. Just when Nangongja thought that the three girls at home should be immersed in their dreams, so he sat alone in the living room to rest for a while and show off his cooking skills, Nangong-ro walked out wearing a somewhat light nightgown. Different from the average female, Nangong-ro's figure was very tall, even Mashiro was slightly shorter than Nangong-ro. Moreover, Nangong-ro's figure was relatively slender. When she walked out wearing a white floral nightgown, her sparkling and translucent skin seemed to become somewhat translucent under the blurry morning sunlight. Her hair was a bit messy because of sleep, and her face looked a bit dazed because of sleepiness. However, in Nangongja's eyes, his sister was showing a different kind of charm at this moment. The current Nangong-ro was no longer the Nangong-ro who kept a certain distance from him in the past few years, and worked hard to become gentle and virtuous. Instead, it was like a long time ago when the two of them depended on each other, the cute sister who acted wantonly to act coquettishly towards him. Ruru. I'm back. At this moment, Nangong-ro's mind was still not clear because she had just woken up. For a moment, she actually didn't notice that Nangongja was already sitting in the living room. Instead, she walked into the kitchen and skillfully opened the refrigerator to take out a bottle of tea, seemingly preparing to pour it out to drink. In order to remind his sister a little, Nangongja opened his mouth to greet Nangong-ro. After a moment of silence, Nangong-ro's eyes stared in the direction of Nangongja for a while. Then, as if she suddenly realized her current situation, her eyes directly opened from the originally confused look directly from her original appearance. Brother, you're back? Nangongja nodded and said to Nangong-ro, yeah, I just came back. When I saw that you were still sleepy, I wanted to wake you up and remind you not to trip and fall. When Nangong-ro heard Nangongja's words, she looked at her own clothes and her little face immediately flushed red. One had to know that her nightgown was very thin. Thin meant transparent, right? Moreover, she didn't like to wear certain indescribable things to sleep. Now that she looked at herself, she felt that she could clearly see the situation inside, just when Nangongja saw that his sister's face suddenly flushed red in confusion, he thought that she had caught a cold and was about to go over to check her temperature. However, just then, Mashiro walked out of his room. At the same time, he saw Nangongja and Nangongro looking at each other, then looking at each other awkwardly. Unlike Nangongja, Mashiro could tell at a glance why Nangongro was blushing. Hence, he walked over to the place where the clothes and hats were hung and took a shawl to drape over Nangongro's shoulders, blocking the view under Nangongro's nightgown. Seeing Mashiro's actions, Nangongja also calmed down and understood why his sister's expression was so strange. That's right. His sister was only a little younger than him. Now that she was a big girl, she naturally had the thought of the difference between a man and a woman. As he thought about it, for some reason, Nangongja felt very uncomfortable in his heart. It was as if the sister who had accompanied him for his entire life was about to run away with another man. The frustration in his heart made Nangongja want to take out his calamity sword and chop all his future brothers-in-law to death. In the past, Yichui always joked with Nangongja, saying that Nangongja was a siscon. Although no one had said that in all these years, it seemed that Nangongja's siscon had not only not weakened, but it seemed to have strengthened by a lot. Sister Rower, you should go back and sleep for a while. Seeing that you haven't slept enough, I'll wake you up after breakfast is done, okay? Mashiro wrapped the shawl around Nangongro's shoulders tightly, then said to Nangongro in a very gentle manner. Compared to Nangongro's gentleness, Mashiro's gentleness was simply astonishing, and it was incomparably compatible with her. Even refined steel would be melted by Mashiro's gentleness, right? Nangongro looked at Mashiro standing in front of her, and for a moment, she became silent. Sure enough, there's still no way to compete? Quietly, no one knew that Nangongro had already made such a judgment for herself. Nangongro silently walked back to her bedroom. Accompanied by Nangongja's confused gaze and Mashiro's even more complicated expression, Nangongro closed her door. After adjusting her mentality, Mashiro once again put on a smile on her face, then turned to Nangongja and said, "Since it's rare for you to wake up so early, why don't you help me make breakfast for Sister Rower and Little Linger?" Mashiro's suggestion was what Nangongja was prepared to do previously. Naturally, Nangongja had nothing to say, but instead, he took on the responsibility for Mashiro. "It's rare for me to make a meal, why don't you help me this time? Although I feel that my cooking might not be as good as yours, it's still a token of my goodwill after being away for half a month, token of your goodwill." When Mashiro heard this word, she couldn't help but look at Nangongro's room. Chapter 352. After returning home in the morning, Nangongro and Nangongja did not speak much for the whole day. In fact, in the past few years, Nangongro was not as attached to her brother as she was when she was young. Nangongja thought he knew what was going on. After all, girls gradually grew up and understood the difference between men and women. It was understandable that they would keep a certain distance from each other. However, Nangongja felt that something was very wrong. The feeling that he had done something wrong lingered in Nangongja's heart for a long time. Could it be that he was wrong? When Nangongja began to have such a thought, the suspicion towards himself could not be stopped. The light of the sun gradually began to fade under the cover of the mountain peak. The bright moon seemed to be holding back its strength to release its brilliance. It was already night time, but the moonlight tonight was exceptionally bright. In the courtyard of Nangongja's house, there were a few small paths paved with terrazzo stones. Under the illumination of the moonlight, the small courtyard was very bright. Nangongja saw that the moonlight tonight was just right, so he directly sat cross-legged on the eaves. He casually placed his green jade gourd and a small wine cup that he found at home beside him. Obviously, he was going to sit there and drink. Nangongro looked at Nangongja, who was sitting alone outside. She turned back to look at Mashiro, who seemed to be cleaning up the dishes in the kitchen. Her eyes could not help but have a little doubt. If it was any other time, when Mashiro saw Nangongja sitting outside wanting to drink, no matter what kind of work he was doing, he would definitely be very gentle like a good wife and mother, pouring wine for Nangongja. This time, Mashiro did not react at all, which made Nangong-ro feel a little strange. But then, Nangong-ro's eyes rolled around, as if she thought of something. Therefore, Nangong-ro gently opened the door between the living room and the eaves, and very respectfully sat beside Nangongja. After sitting down, Nangong-ro even tidied up her clothes properly to make sure that her sitting posture was meticulous enough. Obviously, she was very concerned about her image at this moment. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with her posture, she reached out her hand and took Nangongja's green jade gourd in her hand. This green jade gourd contained Nangongja's favorite wine, so Nangongja usually treasured it and almost no one would touch it. When Nangong-ro picked her brother's favorite wine gourd, Nangong-ro, the green jade gourd, with a cold and warm texture, from her palm to her head. TSK, although Nangong-ro was very careful and hoped that she could lower the sound of pouring wine, it was already night, and the surrounding environment was relatively quiet, so the sound of pouring wine was still so clear. She placed the wine glass on the floor of the eaves, stretched out 2 fingers, and gently pushed the wine glass to Nangongja's hand. Nangong-ro once again returned to her previous awkward but incomparably strict sitting posture. It was hard to imagine how Mashiro's sister learned to sit like this for the whole day. It was really uncomfortable. Ruru. Nangongja naturally knew that his sister was pouring wine for him, so he called out his undying name. When Nangong-ro heard Nangongja call her name, her body obviously trembled. Brother. Is there a problem? To be honest, this was the first time Nangong-ro poured wine for Nangongja. Therefore, Nangong-ro was also very nervous in her heart. She was afraid that she would do something wrong and make her brother unhappy. Nangong-ro was also very angry in her heart. Usually, when she saw Mashiro's sister pouring wine for her brother, she was so elegant and natural, but why did she become so stiff and uncoordinated when it came to herself? Maybe her brother was a little unhappy because of this. Am I going to be replaced by Mashiro's sister by my brother? She didn't know why, but this was the first thought that appeared in Nangong-ro's mind. For the little girl, it seemed that she might be replaced by Mashiro more than being scolded by her brother. Nangongja turned his head to look at his sister. Naturally, he noticed her extremely unnatural expression, and said to his sister with some doubts, "Why do you have such an expression? You look like I'm bullying you." "You?" Nangong-ro softly muttered, "You've always been bullying me." Although she was muttering, Nangongja's hearing was still able to hear what his sister was saying. He reached out his hand and quietly placed a strand of loose hair back on his sister's ear. He said to his sister very gently, "Oh. How should I explain this? You're my sister, I can't wait to dote on you, how can I bully you?" Hearing her brother's question, Nangong-ro didn't know what to say for a moment. Her eyes were a little embarrassed. Her eyes drifted left and right as if she was struggling with something. Finally, she opened her cherry lips and bit her lower lip with her pearly white teeth. She seemed to have made up her mind and said to Nangongja, "Brother. Are you and Mashiro's sister?" Nangong-ro only said half of her words, as if she hoped that her brother could understand her meaning. "Mashiro?" Hearing his sister's words, Nangongja was a little confused. He didn't seem to understand his sister's meaning and said to Nangong-ro, "Why are you suddenly talking about your Mashiro's sister?" Nangong-ro looked at her brother with a face full of resentment. Finally, she gathered her courage and held Nangongja's hand. She used her fingers to gently rub the calluses on Nangongja's palm and thumb due to years of sword practice. She looked into Nangongja's eyes and said very seriously, "Brother, I understand you, just like how you understand me. You know what I mean by that. As expected. Your Mashiro's sister and I are family, just like you are my family. I know that you have your own worries in your heart, but some things are destined to be solved by yourself. No matter what happens, you will always be my most beloved sister. Just like when I first came to Woodleaf, everything I do is to protect my family. Nangongzhe and Nangongro weren't blood-related, this was something that both of them were very clear about. But because they weren't blood-related, Nangongro, who was still a young girl, naturally thought more about it. The two of them didn't ask the question they wanted to ask, nor did they get the answer they wanted to know. Nangongzhe reached out and grabbed the wine cup beside him. He raised his head and poured the drunken immortal wine into his mouth. It was clearly his favorite wine, but Nangongzhe didn't have the mood to savor it at all. Chapter 353. People will always grow, and some of the feelings that were originally ignored will slowly start to grow in their hearts. Just like Nangongzhe, Nangongro, who was sitting next to Nangongro, when she was young, she enjoyed her brother's hard work for her. Even though the days were so difficult, for Nangongro, it was her most cherished time. But as time passed, Nangongzhe, who she and her grandfather had high hopes for, did indeed show his brilliance, and let the whole ninja world give him the title of Yama. Originally, Nangongro thought that she would still be happy for her brother's achievements like before. But things didn't go as she wished. Nangongro didn't know why there were a lot of feelings in her heart that she didn't have before. And these complicated emotions became stronger after the appearance of Mashiro. In the beginning, Mashiro was still very immature and blank. Whether it was for life or for herself, she didn't have any understanding of herself. But slowly, Mashiro changed little by little. Mashiro, who was originally a little natural, began to slowly learn how to cook, wash, and take care of a family. Nangongro was also one of the beneficiaries of this change, but in her heart, she was very unwilling to accept such care. So, Nangongro also forced herself to change. Nangongro, who was so lively and active, changed, became more gentle, became more caring, and became like another Mashiro. But the more she changed, the more confused Nangongro's heart became. Because Nangongro found that no matter how she changed, there was no way she could be as careful and gentle as Mashiro. Mashiro was like the incarnation of the word gentle. Every day, he was as gentle as water, taking care of Nangongzhe, taking care of Nangongro, and taking care of little Linger, who was like the original Nangongro. What kind of feeling was that? If a name had to be given, perhaps only a word like sense of crisis would be appropriate, right? When Nangongzhe said that she would always be his family, Nangongro didn't know why, but her heart was filled with an inexplicable resistance. It seemed that she didn't want to be Nangongzhe's family. Nangongro had something more that she longed for. But these were words that Nangongro couldn't say, and Nangongro didn't dare to say it. Nangongro's hand that was holding the green jade gourd tightened. The originally cool and gentle feeling of the green jade gourd made her feel as if she was holding a piece of ice that would never melt. The coldness invaded her palm, attacked Nangongro's blood vessels, and eroded Nangongro's heart. Silence, Nangongro could only remain silent. Everything passed in silence. Nangongzhe drank the wine that his sister poured for him, and Nangongro poured wine for Nangongzhe again and again in a somewhat mechanical manner. Finally, Nangongzhe seemed to feel that it was enough, so he gently covered his wine cup with his hand. Obviously, he didn't want his sister to continue pouring wine for him. Nangongro immediately understood. She plugged the green jade gourd stopper back and turned around to walk back into the house. Nangongzhe stood on the eaves, enjoying the cold night breeze. Mashiro also slowly walked to Nangongzhe's side. "You heard everything?" Nangongzhe knew that Mashiro had come to his side, so he asked Mashiro. Nangongzhe's voice sounded a little weak, and it was unknown whether it was because of the wine or because of his emotions. It was as if he had no energy at all. "Actually, I know myself very well. I'm a complete idiot when it comes to matters of the heart. I don't understand why my sister and I have become like this. It puzzles me and makes me blame myself. She's my sister, but I didn't fulfill my responsibility to take good care of her. It's not that you don't understand. Mashiro didn't sit respectfully beside Nangongja like before. Instead, he leaned lazily against the eaves and sat opposite Nangongja. Actually, you know what Nangong is thinking about, what I'm thinking about, and even what little Linger is thinking about. But you chose not to understand. Because if you understand, you have to face it. If you understand, you have to accept change. But you don't like change the most. It can even be said that you're the most afraid of change. You only hope that your life can be as you imagine it to be, unchanging and peaceful. So, you chose to escape. Even Rower, little Linger, and I have to escape with you. This isn't a big deal. Who doesn't want to escape from something? Even if you're called Yama, a role that's close to being the judge of life, you're still an ordinary person in this world. Your pressure and your sense of responsibility have already exhausted you. So, escaping isn't shameful. It's even somewhat effective. But, some things have to be faced in the end. So, although I don't hate you for escaping, it's best that you don't escape for too long. After saying this, Mashiro also left. Nangongja knew that Mashiro was telling the truth. Did he really not see through it? Did he really not understand it at all? Emotions were a very important difference between humans and animals. Because of their desire to survive and reproduce, animals begin to act on their own. On the other hand, humans wrapped their bestial nature with a layer of chains called emotions, which made them different from animals. But, weren't emotions also a weapon that hurt humans? Nangongja was afraid. As a person who had been injured countless times on the battlefield and had been on the brink of death countless times, he was very afraid at this moment. Nangongja didn't want to face it because once he did, there was a possibility that he would be injured. Nangongja didn't want to participate in such a gamble. But Mashiro was right. The path of escape would eventually lead to the end. He had to face it eventually. As he thought about it, Nangongja's heart became particularly irritable. Nangongja, who had been restraining himself from drinking, took out his green jade gourd again. This time, he didn't use a wine cup. Instead, he poured it directly into his mouth. Nangongja didn't know how much of the precious drunken immortal wine was wasted because of his rough actions. However, Nangongja didn't feel any heartache or regret. Instead, he continued to drink the wine in his mouth. Chapter 354. Not to mention how complicated Nangongja's mood was at home. At this moment, Woodleaf was more lively than usual, and the reason was the statement issued by the Hokage's office to the village during the day. At this moment, Woodleaf was actually a bit unstable. After all, the 3 generations of Hokage, who ruled Woodleaf for many years, had just passed away, and the roots of Woodleaf, which can be said to be deeply rooted and powerful, were jointly destroyed by Watergate and Nangongja. Although everyone didn't say anything on the surface, they inevitably had some worries in their hearts. With such a consumption of strength, can Woodleaf Village still occupy the position of the top 5 shinobi villages in the shinobi world? Watergate himself is very good at understanding other people's thoughts, or very good at guessing people's minds. He is also very clear about the current situation in the village, so Watergate has already asked his master, one of the Sannin, to go outside the village to find the princess of the Senju clan, Woodleaf Tsunadeheim, Tsunade. Tsunade herself is a very important symbol in the noble forces of Woodleaf, and her medical ninjutsu is the best in the shinobi world. If such a person can return to Woodleaf after more than 10 years, whether it's the ordinary members of Woodleaf or the various families, it's a shot in the arm. And just today, Watergate has received a notice from his master. Tsunade's problem has been solved, although there are a few twists and turns. Watergate has persuaded Tsunade to return to Woodleaf again. And Minato also directly notified all his subordinates, and immediately announced such a news within the village and even the shinobi world, which can be regarded as a warning to the unstable hearts of the people and the enemies in the shinobi world. Many of Konoha's people have fought under Tsunade's command. Even Nangongjia has served under Tsunade for a while. As a female ninja, Tsunade has a unique charm, and many people are convinced by Tsunade. That kind of heroic spirit, even many men can't compare to it, right? The time when Tsunade officially returned to the village was about 9:00 in the morning the next day. Woodleaf's ninjas and civilians have gathered at the village gate at this moment, and it seems that they have been waiting for a long time. Even Watergate, who hasn't been wearing Hokage's hat for a long time, stood in a white tent with a red flame pattern on it, waiting for Tsunade's arrival. On the road outside Woodleaf's gate, Tsunade and Jiraiya walked slowly on the road, step by step. But Jiraiya, who was usually so talkative, was unusually silent at this moment. As the two continued to move, hidden in the forest, gradually, and Tsunade's face was hidden in the forest. The tall shadow rock engraved with 4 Hokage heads appeared in front of Tsunade's eyes, and her originally slow pace directly stopped at this moment. On the shadow rock, 2 of them were Tsunade's grandfathers, and 1 was Tsunade's sensei. Suddenly seeing the faces of these 3 people who were so familiar with her, but who have also left the world, appear in front of her, even Tsunade, who didn't care about life and death, had mixed feelings at this moment. A pair of slightly red eyes appeared on his face, which looked very young because he had cultivated a secret technique. I'm back, but everything seems to have changed. Whether it's the broken tree or the rope tree, whether it's my grandfathers or sensei, they're all gone at this moment. Is this Woodleaf really the place I used to call home? Tsunade has begun to ask herself such a question silently in her heart, but she has no idea what kind of answer she will get, or there is no so-called answer to such a question. Seeing Tsunade stop, Jiraiya's Adam's apple rolled a few times on his neck. He seemed to think for a while and finally said, "Tsunade. Let's go, Watergate is still waiting for us in the village." Tsunade looked back at Jiraiya, who was looking at her, and her eyes almost made Jiraiya want to take Tsunade and leave here directly. The situation of the village, the situation of Watergate, Jiraiya all wanted to leave these behind. Jiraiya really didn't want to see the woman he loved for a lifetime have to face those things that hurt her. But such an impulse was instantly suppressed by Jiraiya from his heart, because perhaps for people like Jiraiya, Woodleaf's matter is beyond his personal feelings. If there is a conflict between Woodleaf and his feelings, Jiraiya can only choose the side that benefits Woodleaf. Perhaps this is the reason why Tsunade chose to break the tree instead of someone who obviously knows better. Let's go. For some reason, Jiraiya always felt that he seemed to see a touch of disappointment in Tsunade's eyes, but when he looked carefully, it disappeared. Tsunade also knew that her current appearance with red eyes was not suitable to appear in front of others, so she used chakra to touch her eyes. The original obvious redness and swelling disappeared in an instant. Tsunade, who looked very lovable just now, has become high-spirited at this moment. Even Jiraiya, who followed Tsunade, felt very envious of her spirit. Sure enough, women, especially strong women like Tsunade, are the kind of people who are very good at hiding their hearts. Slightly sighing in his heart, Jiraiya followed Tsunade's footsteps and walked towards the gate that was not so far away from them. At this moment, all the gates were opened, and residents of Woodleaf stood on the side of the main road. Among these residents, there were also many ninjas, and their eyes were naturally very good. After faintly seeing the figures of Jiraiya and Tsunade, the people waiting at the gate immediately became excited. These two are strong people who led Woodleaf to victory in the Third Shinobi World War. Every resident of Woodleaf has a natural worship for the strong, so when Jiraiya and Tsunade appeared in front of everyone became restless. The shadow guards who followed Watergate here were also sent by Watergate to maintain the order at the scene, so that the excited people would not do anything bad. Watergate also tidied up his clothes, wearing his white haori, and slowly walked towards the gate. Chapter 355. Taking a few quick steps, Watergate walked towards Jiraiya and Tsunade, who were walking towards him. Holding Tsunade's hand very kindly, Watergate said to Tsunade with some relief and excitement, "Welcome back." Watergate's face still had the signature hearty smile, but Tsunade felt that Watergate had changed from before. On the contrary, it made Tsunade feel that Watergate seemed to faintly see the style of the 3 generations Hokage who was called Ninja Hero when he was young. Sure enough, does being Hokage really change a person? Watergate, who was innocent and cute, and sometimes even blushed because of her malicious teasing, has also changed, although it was a little difficult to accept in her heart. After all, it was in public. Watergate, as the Hokage of Woodleaf, can treat her like this. Tsunade still has to express something. So she also showed a smile on her face and said to Watergate, "Thank you for Hokage-sama's reception, I'm back." After listening to Tsunade's words, Watergate seemed to be a little unhappy and said to Tsunade, "Tsunade-sama is wrong. You and my sensei are in the same team of ninja, so you are my elder. Even if I'm Hokage, I'm still Minato Watergate, no matter how much respect I have for you. You are not only a powerful ninja, but also a hero of Woodleaf. I naturally should give you the treatment you deserve." These words sounded really bureaucratic, but no one could find fault with it. Standing behind Tsunade, Jiraiya looked at his disciple who was fully showing his personal charm as Hokage and Minato Watergate at this moment, and for a while, he was somewhat at a loss. Jiraiya was actually a little repulsed by such things, but these things were also indispensable, and Jiraiya naturally had no position to say anything. Everything was so jubilant, and everyone seemed to be immersed in the lively atmosphere of the return of Woodleaf's powerhouse. Yabuki, who liked the lively atmosphere, naturally took her daughter, who was on vacation at home, to see the ceremony of the most famous female ninja in Woodleaf history returning to Woodleaf. After such a ceremony, Yabuki also took her daughter Sakura to visit Nangongja's home after a long time. For Yabuki, whether it was Nangongja, Nangong-ro, Little Linger, or Mashiro, they were all very welcome. The mother and daughter were welcomed into the house and warmly received. Yabuki naturally also told Nangongja about Tsunade's return. After listening to these words, Nangongja couldn't help but sigh. When I first became a ninja and stepped into the battlefield of World War III, I first served Tsunade-sama and White Fang-sama. It was also at that time that I received a lot of care from Tsunade-sama and White Fang-sama. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't be who I am now. Nangongja said, with some nostalgia in his eyes. Seeing Sakura sitting quietly next to Yabuki, Nangongja also seemed to suddenly think of something and continued, "In fact, Sakura and Tsunade-sama also have this fate. During the Chunin exam, in order to let Sakura quickly develop combat power, I also taught Sakura a method called one-inch punch. In fact, to a large extent, this method of exerting power is also because I followed Tsunade-sama back then and saw Tsunade-sama exert monstrous strength several times. Sakura and Tsunade-sama are also somewhat similar, whether it is the control of chakra or the way of fighting, they have similar parts. In Sakura's heart, Nangongja himself is a rare strong man in the world." Now that Nangongja actually began to praise a female ninja so much, naturally, Sakura was a little surprised. "Nangong-san, is this Tsunade-sama so powerful? Obviously, she doesn't look very old, but she is called a Sannin like the old white-haired uncle behind her. Is Sannin actually the same name as Hokage?" Sakura asked her question without hesitation. Sure enough, girls care more about a person's appearance. Although aware that what she said was a little rude, Sakura didn't intend to apologize at all. Instead, she seemed to be ready to get to the bottom of this matter. "I don't know very well, but Tsunade-sama is indeed of the same generation as Jiraiya-sama. It seems that he has cultivated some kind of secret technique that allows him to keep his appearance unchanged. Eternal youth?" Nangongja's words directly made all the girls in the house light up, just like a pervert who saw a beauty, their eyes glowed with lust. As long as it's a woman, there is no one who doesn't care about their appearance. When they heard that a secret technique that can make them eternal youth really exists, no one wouldn't be tempted. Naturally, Sakura also thought of Tsunade's soft face and impressive figure that she saw at the gate just now. If only she could do the same. Nangong-san, I want to worship Tsunade-sama as my teacher. After an almost negligible amount of time of inner struggle, Sakura finally said such a sentence to Nangong-ja. Indeed, I also think that if I let you practice under Tsunade-sama, you will make great progress, but I haven't said anything yet. Why do you already have such a plan? Nangong-ja obviously still didn't understand how great the temptation of eternal youth is for women. Nangong-san, you also said that Tsunade-sama and I are very similar to each other. So naturally, I hope that I can stay young. Ah no, I want to be stronger. So, please introduce me to Tsunade-sama, no matter what the test is, I am willing to accept it. Although Sakura accidentally revealed her purpose, her eyes were very firm. Obviously, she wanted to become Tsunade's disciple. Nangong-ja also felt that this was a good choice, so he could only nod and say to Sakura, I will try to convey your request to Tsunade-sama, but now that Tsunade-sama has just returned to the village, there will be a lot of people who will bother her during this time. After a while, I will go to Tsunade-sama and ask her to accept you as her disciple. Sakura, I watched you grow up. Uncle Nangong naturally hopes that you can have a better future and become stronger. I just hope that this face will be of some use, right? After all, although Tsunade-sama looks very heroic, in fact, she is somewhat inexplicably capricious. Chapter 356. After the grand welcoming ceremony at the Woodleaf Gate, Tsunade, Jiraiya, and Watergate finally left the crowd and came to the Hokage office building to meet with the representatives of the elder group, Xuan Xiaochun and Mido Monitis. Unlike the welcoming ceremony at the gate of the Woodleaf clan, this was the real welcoming ceremony for Tsunade's return to the Woodleaf clan. Although Xuan Xiaochun and Mido Monitis didn't have a close relationship with Tsunade, as representatives of the Woodleaf clan, they were naturally closer to Tsunade, who was a direct descendant of the Senju clan. When the five of them got together, some meaningless greetings were inevitable. Xuan Xiaochun and Mido Monitis were very talkative people themselves. Watergate also improved under various activities as Hokage over the years. Tsunade, as a direct descendant of the Senju clan, was naturally very good at social speech. Although Jiraiya didn't like to communicate with people so much, he was also very good at it. The five of them exchanged pleasantries for nearly 20 minutes, but all of them seemed to be in high spirits. After all, Jiraiya's background was relatively low, and he didn't like this kind of environment, so he took the lead and said to Watergate, We'll have time to talk later, but Tsunade has just returned to the village. She must be very tired, even if she doesn't have to travel all the way. Why don't we give Tsunade's resignation as soon as possible, and then let Tsunade go back and rest early? Watergate was naturally the closest to Jiraiya, and he knew that his master didn't like this scene so much, so he nodded and said to Mido Monitis, Xuan Xiaochun, and Tsunade, what Jiraiya-sensei said also makes sense. Anyway, Tsunade-sama has returned, we don't have to rush. Why don't we take a seat? Watergate's hand made a palm gesture and invited them to take a seat. As the Hokage, naturally no one would disrespect Watergate, so they all pulled out the chair next to them and sat down in the conference room. And the moment Jiraiya, who proposed to directly start the formal meeting, sat down on the chair, the relaxed look on his face was reflected in everyone's eyes. Although Jiraiya didn't sit on the chair in a very relaxed manner, he was still a little loose. Tsunade, who was sitting next to him, glanced at Jiraiya. Seeing Jiraiya's loose posture, she was not used to it. He stretched out a hand and gently patted Jiraiya's thigh, reminding him not to sit so loosely. But when Jiraiya saw Tsunade's hand reaching out to his leg and patting him gently, he didn't understand Tsunade's intention at all. Instead, he had a wretched look on his face. He even wiped his eyes on the corner of his clothes and looked at Tsunade's soft hand that was about to hold it. Although Tsunade was famous for her medical ninjutsu, her hot temper and terrifying, monstrous strength weren't just for show. Originally, Tsunade wanted to remind Jiraiya because his posture was a bit indecent, but she didn't expect that Jiraiya, the intimate paradise, was really not thinking about serious things. He didn't know what Jiraiya was imagining in his mind, but his slightly widened nostrils, narrowed pupils, and rapid breathing really made people feel that the word wretched existed for guys like Jiraiya. You bastard, enough is enough. Just when Jiraiya's hand was about to hold Tsunade's hand, Tsunade finally couldn't continue to hide in front of Mitomanitis, Xuanshao-chun, and Watergate. Chakra directly broke out, and chakra condensed on Tsunade's fist. Blue veins stood out on her temple and neck. Obviously, Tsunade also endured a lot. Tsunade, it's my fault. Don't. At this moment, Jiraiya finally remembered the horror of being dominated by Tsunade's iron fist. Jiraiya, who had always boasted of being romantic and not obscene, was now blasted out of the wall and turned into a star flying in the sky. The scream in his mouth was like the sound of the friction between the sky and the air. It unexpectedly had a different kind of beauty. She just didn't know how many bones in Jiraiya's body would be broken after he landed, and where would he need to rest. Watergate, Xuanshao-chun, and Mitomanitis could only watch Jiraiya die and Tsunade explode without saying a word. Nonsense. Who would dare to stand up at this time? Who wouldn't dare to fight with Tsunade's temper, and Tsunade's monstrous fist was so easy to endure. Even a powerful ninja like Jiraiya would sometimes break a few of his ribs after being punched by Tsunade. He had to recuperate. Let's get down to business. Watergate glanced at the huge hole in the wall of the conference room, and he was a little distressed. He had to pay for it again. Hearing Minato's words, Utatane Koharu and Mitokado Hamura also hurriedly agreed. They couldn't let Tsunade sulk like this. If she couldn't figure it out and left the village in anger, what would they do? Woodleaf wouldn't be able to survive in the ninja world anymore. Xuanshao-chun looked at Watergate, Mitomanitis, and Tsunade sitting next to him, took out a letter of appointment from his arms, handed it to Tsunade, and said at the same time, after the discussion between the elders of Kiba and Woodleaf Hokage, we decided to restore one of the Woodleaf Sannin, the daughter of the Senju clan, Tsunade, as the director of Kiba Hospital and the commander-in-chief of the Woodleaf Medical Force. Since it's peacetime, the medical force has no combat mission for the time being. Instead, it has assumed the responsibility of training medical ninjas. As the innovator of the three-person team system, we decided to let Tsunade be responsible for training new medical ninjas of Woodleaf. Tsunade, I don't know if you are willing to accept. Tsunade glanced at Watergate sitting next to her with a little surprise, and Watergate also smiled very gently at Tsunade. You know, Tsunade also proposed a plan to vigorously train medical ninjas, but it has never been passed. She didn't expect to have such a training plan as soon as she returned to Woodleaf today. And according to Xuanshao-chun's words, it's not difficult to infer that her authority has been greatly delegated. It can be said that she can train medical ninjas according to her wishes. This was unimaginable in the past. It seems that Watergate must have contributed to such a plan, right? Chapter 357. In the Hokage office building, Watergate, Tsunade, Xuanshao-chun, and Mitomanitis were discussing Tsunade's future responsibilities and obligations. Jiraiya, who had just been punched into a meteor in the sky by Tsunade, had used his various means to land safely on the ground. In fact, the reason why Jiraiya acted like that just now was largely because he didn't want to be in the same room with the four people just now. In Jiraiya's opinion, if Tsunade was still wandering in the shinobi world, she would be much happier than in Woodleaf. Woodleaf has too many hidden secrets and heartbreaking tragedies. Even Jiraiya would leave Woodleaf for the shinobi world if he had nothing to do. Although Jiraiya has always boasted that he collected important information while collecting materials, Woodleaf's Umbu and intelligence collection personnel are not as good as Jiraiya. In fact, Jiraiya didn't want to stay in Woodleaf for too long. Jiraiya does love Woodleaf deeply, and he is willing to pay any price for Woodleaf, but it doesn't mean that Jiraiya likes those high-ranking decision-makers who stand at the top of Woodleaf. As a ninja from a grassroots background, no one knows better than Jiraiya the face of these decision-makers and what they do. Wandering aimlessly on the street, from time to time, he put his hand on his chest where Tsunade's punch just hit. With a slightly bitter face, he slowly rubbed it, hoping to relieve some of the pain. His eyes wandered around. In fact, Jiraiya hasn't wandered on the streets of Woodleaf for a long time. Usually, when he was in Woodleaf, he would either peep. No, go to the women's bathhouse to collect materials, or help Watergate deal with all kinds of troublesome matters. It's been a long time since he could wander on the street with nothing to do. While walking, Jiraiya suddenly saw a shop sign. This shop was Naruto's favorite, Ichiraku Ramen. There was a large hand-painted poster at the entrance of the shop, and Tsunade's image was drawn on it. The painting was really good, and it preserved Tsunade's spirit. Under Tsunade's image, there was a big line written, "Welcome Tsunade-sama back to Woodleaf, 10% off all ramen." Seeing this, Jiraiya smiled and thought that the owner of this shop was really good at doing business. Jiraiya opened the curtain of Ichiraku Ramen and walked inside. When the boss saw a customer coming in, he enthusiastically shouted, "Welcome, may I know what you need?" Now, 10% off all the ramen in the shop. Seeing the enthusiastic gesture of the boss, Jiraiya unconsciously relaxed. He casually pulled out a chair and said to the boss is really good at doing business. Knowing that Tsunade-sama has returned to Woodleaf, you can still think of such a promotion method. You must have made a lot of money today, right? Hearing Jiraiya's teasing words, the boss stretched out his hand and scratched the back of his head and said to Jiraiya, "I don't know about this. It's just that a customer who comes occasionally told me that doing more small activities can make the business better. He even personally drew the poster for me at the door. Don't say, although there is a 10% discount, the flow of people is indeed a little more than before." Hearing the boss mention the poster at the door, Jiraiya remembered the painting of Tsunade's spirit. He was also interested and asked the boss of Ichiraku Ramen. "Speaking of which, the painting at the entrance of your shop is really good. I've seen Tsunade-sama, and she is exactly the same as that painting. Even her temperament was drawn." Mentioning the poster at the door, Karate excitedly said to Jiraiya as if he was showing off. "This was drawn by the sister of a regular customer. I didn't expect that someone could draw a person so similar. When Tsunade-sama's welcoming ceremony was held, I took a look from a distance and found that it was really similar to the poster at our door." "Wait. Aren't you?" Mentioning Tsunade's welcoming ceremony, the boss looked at Jiraiya with long white hair and red paint on his face in front of him. The more he looked at him, the more he looked like Jiraiya, who was also a Sannin, following Tsunade at Woodleaf's entrance. Jiraiya naturally knew that the boss recognized him, so he quickly reached out and pressed the boss's hand down, and then said to the boss, "Yes, yes, yes, I am. Don't make it public, I'm just your customer now." The boss's reaction was also very fast. He knew that he was a little too excited. "You know, even Hokage-sama occasionally comes to eat in his shop." Now that a Sannin came to his shop, it wasn't something unacceptable. "You're right, you're just my customer. Even Hokage-sama sometimes comes to my house to eat ramen." "It's nothing," the boss said to Jiraiya as if he was showing off, as if he wanted to prove how popular his shop was. Because Naruto really loved Ichiraku Ramen, occasionally Watergate would follow Naruto to eat at Ichiraku Ramen. After the initial surprise, the boss slowly got used to this kind of thing, and even occasionally showed off to his customers. Obviously, the boss wanted to show off the popularity of his shop. Jiraiya was naturally clear about Naruto's love for Ichiraku Ramen, So perhaps to cater to the boss's enthusiasm, Jiraiya also smiled and said to the boss, "That's really amazing, I didn't expect Hokage-sama to like this shop so much. I don't know what Hokage-sama likes to eat the most, give me a bowl of ramen, let me try it and see how delicious it is that even Hokage-sama can't forget it." Hearing Jiraiya's words, the boss's face was full of joy, so he shouted, "Okay. Hokage-sama's special, super large barbecued pork ramen." After that, the boss hurriedly went to make ramen for Jiraiya. At this moment, Jiraiya was also in a very good mood. Although he was just talking nonsense with an ordinary villager of Woodleaf, Jiraiya found that he enjoyed this kind of atmosphere so much, more than when he was with Mito Monitis, Xuan Shao-chun, Watergate, and Tsunade. Chapter 358. Jiraiya himself was born in the marketplace, so when Jiraiya sat in the slightly narrow Ichiraku ramen and ate the simple Ichiraku ramen without using any high-end ingredients, Jiraiya felt like he belonged here. Temesa himself was very talkative. Occasionally, he would joke with Jiraiya and say a few dirty jokes. The two old uncles also tacitly smiled at each other. Jiraiya's hearty laughter rushed out of Ichiraku ramen. The thin curtain at the door echoed in the street. Occasionally, a few passers-by were attracted by Jiraiya's laughter. The bowl of noodles was quickly finished. Temesa looked around and saw that there were not many people in the shop, so he walked out from behind the counter and closed the door of his shop. Obviously, he did not intend to continue the business. He held a huge bottle in one hand. On the bottle's seal, there were 3 big words, Sakura Masamune. There was also a red ribbon near the mouth of the bottle. It looked very ugly. "Jiraiya-sama. I see that there are not many people in the shop. Why don't you and I have a few drinks?" With that, Temesa put the sake in his hand directly on the table. 2 delicate and small wine glasses were also taken out by Temesa from the bar. Obviously, Temesa was also a person who loved wine. Sakura Masamune was a very famous brand of sake, and these 2 obviously expensive white porcelain wine glasses were not common goods. Jiraiya himself also likes to drink a few glasses. After seeing that Temesa actually took out a wine like Sakura Masamune, he couldn't help but want to drink. After nodding, he said to Temesa, "If you want to drink a few glasses, I naturally can't refuse. Besides, good wine is easy to get, but a bosom friend is hard to find. Although we haven't known each other for long, we can be regarded as friends. Drinking is naturally not a problem." After listening to Jiraiya's words, Temesa looked proud. He was very happy to put the wine glass in his hand in front of Jiraiya and himself. He gently pulled out the cork of the sake in his hand. A very elegant fragrance wafted out of the bottle. Jiraiya, who was sitting next to him, smelled this smell and knew that this bottle of Sakura Masamune was definitely not a wine that was mass-produced by the winery, but a specially brewed ancient wine, that is, a sake that was suitable for long-term storage. This bottle of wine is different from ordinary wine. Temba naturally knew that Jiraiya was a wine expert, so he introduced it to Jiraiya. Ordinary sake can't be stored for a long time. Once it exceeds the shelf life, it will become turbid and sour. Temba naturally knew that Jiraiya was a wine expert, so he introduced it to Jiraiya. However, this bottle of wine in my hand is the kind of ancient wine that can be stored for decades without going bad. It has the meaning of everlasting. Our Yu family and the family that brewed Sakura have been friends for generations. When my daughter was born, they specially sent 5 bottles of ancient wine as a congratulatory gift. It's been 17 or 18 years. So it's a daughter's sake? Jiraiya also understood why he had such a bottle of wine. It was obviously not easy to get. This is your daughter's dowry, don't waste it. Let's find some other ordinary wine. When your daughter gets married, I will definitely come and have a good drink with you. Hearing Jiraiya's words, Temesa patted Jiraiya's shoulder and said to Jiraiya in a very forthright manner, "What are you talking about? Even if it's already opened, it can't be stored. Besides..." Temesa looked back at his daughter who was still helping in the kitchen and said, "My daughter is very fierce. I don't know when she will find a good family. If we drink this bottle of sake, won't there still be 4 bottles of sake? The meaning of being in pairs is also good." Seeing Temesa speaking to this point, Jiraiya naturally couldn't refuse. He gently picked up the white porcelain cup in front of him, obviously waiting for Temesa to pour him a glass of wine. Temesa immediately understood and raised the bottle in his hand to pour wine for Jiraiya. Seeing that Jiraiya's cup was full, Temesa also filled his own cup. The two of them didn't touch their glasses. Instead, they placed their glasses on their foreheads to show their respect. After that, they finished the wine in their glasses. The customers in Ichiraku Ramen also finished their meal. Knowing that Temesa had the habit of drinking wine after graduation, they all greeted him and walked out of the restaurant. Temesa's daughter Chang also knew that his father finally met someone who could drink with her. She also very considerately began to tidy up the various kitchen utensils, tables, chairs, and garbage on the ground in the restaurant. Time passed by little, and the 2-liter bottle of sake was almost emptied by Jiraiya and Temari. The alcohol content of sake itself wasn't that high, but the after-effects were very strong. What's more, the two drank a daughter's sake that had been stored for more than 10 years. This made Temesa and Jiraiya blush and talk nonsense from time to time. "Oh oi. Oh oi," Jiraiya's mouth seemed to be stuffed with a ball. His words were somewhat muffled as he called Temesa. "Oh oi. Oh oi. Oh oi. What's wrong?" Temesa couldn't speak clearly, but he still subconsciously called out to Jiraiya. I'm so king sorry for the woman I love. For my own ideals, I dragged her into this fire pit again. Why am I such a coward? She left Woodleaf because she was heartbroken, but I still shamelessly pulled her back. I'm so sorry for her, so sorry for her. Under the stimulation of alcohol, Jiraiya finally spoke out the words that he had been suppressing in his heart for the entire day. Jiraiya's sudden outburst startled the already drunk Temesa and Changpu, who was sitting on a chair beside him. They obviously didn't expect the amiable Jiraiya to reveal such an emotional side at this moment. Although Temurai was drunk, it seemed that he still retained some consciousness. He patted Jiraiya's shoulder and said to Jiraiya, "Oh oi, it's okay. Since she's willing to come back with you, then naturally she's prepared to come back. Life, after all, has to be faced. Perhaps this is a fire pit for her, but isn't a fire pit the best place to forge real gold? Don't worry. There's still plenty of time. If she really can't stay any longer, she won't hold it in and will just leave." Inside the Ichiraku ramen shop, Ichiraku was using his muffled words to appease Jiraiya, who didn't seem to be so calm. Outside the door of Ichiraku ramen, a woman with short blonde hair and a very hot figure was standing outside the shop. She had a purple diamond pattern between her eyebrows. She was wearing a beige inner green vest. Hearing Jiraiya's shouts from inside, her eyes couldn't help but soften. Chapter 359. Jiraiya didn't know how he got home, because his memory stopped at the moment when he was fighting with Tsunade. As a ninja, this kind of hangover is simply unimaginable. Although Jiraiya believes that he will never say something that endangers Woodleaf secrets, he can't guarantee that he won't break out of some personal emotions. Jiraiya, who was annoyed at this moment, smelled the burnt smell of heated toast and fried eggs. There's actually breakfast? Jiraiya is a person who doesn't know how to cook at all. It can be seen from the paper shells of cups everywhere in Jiraiya's house. It's such a person, how can there be the smell of breakfast in his house? Isn't this a joke? Jiraiya lifted his quilt and found that his clothes have changed into his pajamas. He opened his pajama pants with a little curiosity. Jiraiya was immediately shocked. She had even changed her underwear. He put his feet into his slippers and walked out of his room in a panic. Jiraiya looked around and followed the smell of breakfast. A figure was standing in the kitchen at the moment, looking at the pan in front of him anxiously. There was a wisp of black smoke floating in the air at the moment, and the smell of burnt eggs was so conspicuous. But Jiraiya didn't have time to care about the burnt eggs, because the person standing next to the stove and cooking in an apron turned out to be his teammate, Konoha Tsunade, who was also a sannin like him. Are you kidding me? Tsunade can cook? Tsunade. Jiraiya said tentatively to Tsunade, who was standing opposite him. Tsunade seemed to be anxious about the burnt fried egg in front of her. She didn't even turn her face and shouted, "Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! What are you shouting for? Is this the time for you to talk? Hurry up and go to the dining table and clean up that mess. If that place isn't clean by the time I finish cooking, I'll break 3 of your ribs." His tone was still a bit rude, but Jiraiya seemed to have relaxed. He reached out and touched his chest as if confirming something. Tsunade was still the original Tsunade. What he saw just now was an illusion. An illusion. But in a place where Jiraiya couldn't see, Tsunade's face couldn't help but blush. Her face, which had become extremely youthful after cultivating the Een Seal technique, combined with the blush on her face, made her look as beautiful as a 16-year-old girl in love. Because of Tsunade's threat just now, Jiraiya was cleaning up his house at full speed in order not to break 3 of his ribs. His speed was so fast that he left afterimages in the air. He didn't expect Jiraiya to use his full strength at this moment to clean up the house. Others didn't know, but Jiraiya knew that Tsunade was actually a little bit of a clean freak. If Tsunade saw that the house he cleaned up was still so messy, not to mention 3 of his ribs, even his life would be in danger. After a while, the house, which was originally filled with all kinds of garbage, was cleaned up spotless. But Jiraiya obviously didn't have so many bags to clean up the garbage. Where did so much garbage go? Jiraiya glanced at a large closet in the corner of his house from time to time. His nose even moved slightly as if he was smelling something strange. After sniffing for a while, he took out a bottle of air freshener and sprayed half of it at his house. However, the cabinet in the corner was still sprayed for a while. Just after Jiraiya was busy for a long time, Tsunade also finished her love breakfast. She was holding a plate with 2 cups of hot milk and 2 plates of toast and fried eggs that didn't look so good. "You, get over here and eat." Glancing at Jiraiya, who was sitting on the floor, Tsunade said to Jiraiya very domineeringly as if she was calling her own puppy. Okay, obviously, he was treated like this, but Jiraiya still looked happy, as if he was very lucky to be treated like this by Tsunade. This is really a case of Zhou Yu beating Huang Gai, an S and a masochist. She put the plate in her hand on a small table on the ground, looked at the dark edges of the fried eggs, and looked at Jiraiya, who was sitting next to her with a "I'm very obedient" look. She pushed the plate in front of Jiraiya and said to Jiraiya, "Eat." Jiraiya was like a robot that received an order. He directly reached out and grabbed the toast inside and stuffed it into his mouth. But because he ate too fast, he still reached out and grabbed the cup of milk and poured it into his mouth. He seemed to want to swallow the food in his mouth. Tsunade saw Jiraiya's appearance, and for a while, she couldn't help but laugh. She moved a little to Jiraiya's side, reached out and patted Jiraiya's back. She seemed to hope that Jiraiya would not choke, and said to Jiraiya in a very gentle tone, "Well, don't worry, no one is going to rob you. You're the only one who would wolf down the food I make. Even Rope Tree would find all kinds of excuses to run away when he saw me cooking. He didn't want to be ravaged by my food." Hearing Tsunade's words, Jiraiya looked at Tsunade for no reason, but found that there was a trace of tears in the corner of Tsunade's eyes at this moment. This little bit of tears made Jiraiya's heart ache. He immediately swallowed the food in his mouth and said to Tsunade, "How can it be? The food you make is delicious." That's Nawaki's ambition. He doesn't know how to cherish the fruits of his sister's labor. If it were me, I would eat it even if it's not delicious. Looking at Jiraiya's clumsy comfort at this moment, Tsunade stretched out her hand and wiped the tear from the corner of her eye, and a smile bloomed on her face again. The traces of tears left on her face matched with Tsunade's bright face at this moment. She was like a red rose stained with dew, delicate and fresh. "This is what you said, then why don't you hurry up and finish these things?" Tsunade's rare coquettishness had slowly melted Jiraiya's manly heart into sweet candy, making it difficult to part with such a sweet feeling. Chapter 360. While eating, Jiraiya couldn't sit quietly anymore. After all, there were still a lot of questions in Jiraiya's heart. Whether it was how he came back from Ichiraku Ramen or how his clothes were all changed, these questions really made Jiraiya's heart itch. He really wanted to figure out what happened. After holding it for a long time, Jiraiya finally couldn't hold it anymore. Reiko, who had eaten half of the toast in her hand, tidied up her pajamas, turned slightly so that his face could face Tsunade's face. Jiraiya said very seriously, "Tsunade, although your cooking is delicious, I still have a few questions to ask you. Last night, I drank too much at Ichiraku Ramen's restaurant. What happened to me?" Before he finished speaking, Tsunade glanced at Jiraiya. She seemed to be curious why Jiraiya asked such a retarded question and said to Jiraiya, "I got it back for you. Asking questions always has to be done step by step. First, ask how he came back, then ask how he changed his clothes, and finally ask who changed his underwear." Well, Jiraiya gave himself a string of 6666666 to praise his high-end chat skills. "Then what about my clothes?" Jiraiya tentatively asked Tsunade again, hoping to push his ultimate question a little closer. Tsunade was very cooperative. Although she still looked at Jiraiya like he was retarded, she still nodded and said to Jiraiya, "Yes, I also changed your pajamas." "Very well, the best part is coming soon." Thinking of the question he was about to ask, Jiraiya's forehead was dripping with cold sweat. He seemed to be very nervous. He reached out to take his milk to calm himself down, but Jiraiya, who was nervous, reached out his hand to Tsunade's glass of milk and poured it all into his mouth without thinking. Tsunade looked at Jiraiya with a restrained expression as he drank her milk. That was something she had drunk before. What does this wretched, perverted guy want to do? He really did drink. Now, there was still a little bit of alcohol left in his body to boost his courage. "So, then my underwear is?" Jiraiya asked his last question intermittently. Tsunade was still very indifferent to Jiraiya and said, "I also changed it." Hearing Tsunade's cold answer, Jiraiya was a little angry at that time. Although he was a little old, he was still very rich. In the past, when he went to the bath, everyone looked at his work with a respectful attitude. Since Tsunade changed his underwear for him, she naturally saw it. But why was she so cold? No man would be able to tolerate it. "Don't you think it's magnificent?" Jiraiya was still struggling, but Tsunade was still calm. Looking at Jiraiya's strange behavior, Tsunade pondered for a while. She seemed to have just understood what Jiraiya meant by magnificent. He said to Jiraiya calmly and even with a little pity, "Jiraiya, I am a doctor, a medical ninja. I still know some things, and I also know the average of men. Don't be too sad. Take good care of yourself and keep a good schedule. Although there is no way to increase your size, it can still make you a little useful." Facing Tsunade's blatant flirting, Jiraiya didn't feel a little excited at the moment. Tsunade's words, "As long as one has a normal IQ, they should understand." Tsunade meant that Jiraiya's capital was not so magnificent, and he even had some lingering thoughts. Hearing Tsunade's words, Jiraiya even began to suspect that the admiring eyes of the group of people when he went to the bathhouse were actually pitiful eyes. Jiraiya immediately turned gray at the moment, eating the food in front of him like a machine. Tsunade walked to the kitchen, took out a box of milk, and poured it into her quilt. But her face had a touch of shyness and excitement after a successful prank. "If I don't provoke you in return, wouldn't it be a disgrace to my reputation as Tsunade Heim?" Thinking about it, Tsunade couldn't help but remember what she saw last night, and her cheeks blushed even more. In the Hokage's office, Tsunade and Jiraiya both sat in the chair opposite Watergate. Tsunade was in a good state. She looked energetic, and she was obviously very motivated. At this moment, Jiraiya's eyes were bloodshot, and even the original shape of the tobacco pipe had become heavier. He muttered words like size and function back and forth in his mouth. Watergate couldn't say anything to his master, so he could only put Jiraiya aside and said to Tsunade first. "Tsunade-sama, we have discussed the topic of how to train Woodleaf's medical ninja before. After a discussion between me and the elders of Konoha, we agreed that you can select a ninja from the newly promoted genin for professional training. We have also prepared some information for you. You can choose the ninja you like for training." With that, Watergate also handed a thick folder on his desk to Tsunade. Among them was the comprehensive analysis of the genin who graduated from Woodleaf in the past 2 years. It was specially integrated to help Tsunade select training personnel, but it was uncertain how much Watergate's personal information was mixed in it. After all, it was better to use such a precious resource to train ninjas who could be loyal to Tsunade, right? Tsunade didn't care how much Watergate thought about this information. Before coming back, Tsunade said that she would not accept any combat tasks, and she would only be responsible for logistics. Tsunade also planned to verify this information herself. Presumably, with Watergate's political vision, he wouldn't cheat on such a thing. Otherwise, wouldn't Watergate's fraud be exchanged for Tsunade's fraud? It doesn't make any sense at all. Tsunade waved her hand, indicating that she could do her own things. Tsunade also knew that she shouldn't stay, so she turned around and walked out of the door. Chapter 361. Seeing that Tsunade had walked out of the door of his office, Watergate finally had a chance to pay attention to his master, Jiraiya, who was just sitting on the side with a dazed expression. "Master! Master!" Watergate tried to call his master, but found that Jiraiya didn't respond. Watergate could only stand up from his position, holding his desk with one hand and waving his hand in front of Jiraiya. Finally, Jiraiya broke free from his world. "Master, are you okay? I have something to trouble you." Seeing that Jiraiya's matter was restored, Watergate also sat down in his seat and began to take out a document beside him to hand it to Jiraiya. But Jiraiya suddenly jumped up from where he was sitting and directly interrupted Watergate's words. Jiraiya looked anxious, looking at his apprentice sitting opposite him and said, "Watergate, come here. Master has a presumptuous request. Take off your pants, and I will explain the reason to you." Such words directly made Watergate's knees soften, and he had an impulse to kneel down. He has always known that his master likes Tsunade. But now, why did his sensei ask him to take off his pants? Could it be that he was stimulated by Tsunade, and his whole body became bent? Although he is handsome, he is a man with a wife. How can he offer his chrysanthemum like this? The chilling sensation emanating from his buttocks caused Minato to sink into an exceedingly sensitive state of mind, as he probed his master with a probing tone. "Master, did you just confess to Tsunade-sama and get cruelly rejected? You don't look normal at all," Watergate said to Jiraiya worriedly. After hearing Watergate's very unreliable words, Jiraiya gradually broke free from his frenzied emotions. Although it involves his privacy, Watergate is like his own child, and there is nothing to hide. So Jiraiya told Watergate about what happened between him and Tsunade. Watergate was stunned after listening to the story. Fortunately, although his wife Shina Kushina learned medical ninjutsu from Tsunade for a while, she didn't directly become his disciple. Otherwise, God knows what his lovely wife Shina Kushina will become. If she's really the same as Tsunade now, then I'm really a little excited. Ba. After clearing all the complicated thoughts in his mind and trying to calm himself down, Watergate said to Jiraiya, "Master, you don't have to worry, I've seen your friend, she is really above average. I think Tsunade-sama just wants to tease you, so you don't have to take it to heart. Let's get down to business." Hearing the recognition from his apprentice, Jiraiya, who was very self-doubting, finally got some spirit. "I didn't expect that Tsunade, who I have loved for so many years, is so dirty. It seems that I have to find a way to improve my flirting skills." Of course, Jiraiya only thought so in his heart. After all, his apprentice has said that he wants to talk about business, so naturally, Jiraiya has to give Watergate face. "Tell me, what do you need me to help you with?" Watergate handed the information he just picked up to Jiraiya. Jiraiya reached out and took it in his hand and began to slowly read the information. Jiraiya's originally lazy demeanor has become sharp at this moment. It seems that there is a kind of anger spreading in his heart. Nagato, Konan, and Yahiko, these three children are the founders of the Akatsuki organization that has always brought us great trouble, and they are also planning a plan that is enough to sweep the entire shinobi world. Although Jiraiya said it as a question, his dignified tone showed that he already believed the records in this document. Watergate took the document from Jiraiya's hand, pointed to a special symbol in the corner of the document and said to Jiraiya, "This document was found in a secret data room of Root when I was annihilating Root. It records in detail the birth of the Akatsuki, and the intervention of Danzo and Hanzo the salamander in the annihilation of the Akatsuki, and the various small tricks that the Akatsuki has been using. I think the Akatsuki must be planning something big, and Sensei, you also said that this man named Nagato has the eyes of the Rikudo Sennin, we have to be careful. What do you need me to do? Clean up the sect." Jiraiya's eyes flashed with a trace of anger. Obviously facing such a disciple, he already had a trace of determination in his heart. Watergate waved his hand and said to Jiraiya, "For the time being, it's not the right time. If we don't kill the snake, it will only harm us. We can't attack so easily. The goal of the Akatsuki can be judged to be the bijou, and Woodleaf has the most powerful bijou, the Nine Tails. Since we have such a good card, naturally, we can't play it so carelessly. What we need is to let Naruto grow quickly, and play a greater role in the future battle." Watergate said, and Jiraiya already understood what he meant. "You need me to help you train Naruto?" Minato nodded and continued, "That's right. Yes, about the way to control the chakra in my body, I have already asked Shina Kushina to summarize a set of methods, and I will give it to you later. After a while, you will take Naruto with you to the shinobi world, to a certain extent, disrupt the Akatsuki's line of sight, and do everything possible to improve Naruto's strength. The shinobi world is getting more and more difficult to calm down. While it's still calm, we have to do our best to accumulate our strength." Watergate said, and his whole body stood up. Jiraiya looked at his disciple, but found that his disciple at this moment was surging with an emotion that was completely invisible to him, ambition. After becoming the Hokage with real power, Watergate's ambition began to expand. Although Watergate still abided by his bottom line, in many things, Watergate is no longer as gentle as he used to be. It seems that everyone will become different after having power, whether it's the 3 generations Hokage, Orochimaru, first Hokage, or second Hokage, for power, for their own status. They really made the shinobi world bleed too much. This is not what Jiraiya wants to see. Chapter 362. After the discussion between Jiraiya and Watergate, Naruto, who was confused and excited, quietly left the village with Jiraiya. Naruto didn't know what he would face in the future. To some extent, he even became a chess piece in the game between his father and Akatsuki. For Naruto, perhaps leaving Woodleaf with Jiraiya this time was actually the same as the previous mission he took with Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura to the Wave Country. It was just a slightly longer trip. What Jiraiya and Naruto didn't know was that when they left the Woodleaf, there was actually a person standing in a hidden place watching them leave the Woodleaf. This person was Tsunade, who had just returned to the Woodleaf. She thought that her overt and covert hints these days had made Jiraiya understand her feelings, but now when Jiraiya encountered Woodleaf's business that conflicted with her personal affairs, he still chose to leave resolutely instead of continuing to cultivate feelings with her. Looking at Jiraiya's back that was slightly old because of the vicissitudes of life, Tsunade could only shake her head and laugh at her ignorance. Didn't she already know? Jiraiya was a fool. No matter what happened, he would always put Woodleaf first. He had already known about this for decades. But why, now watching Jiraiya leave Woodleaf, in Tsunade's heart, there was a kind of sadness as if she was abandoned. Sparkling teardrops were born in her eyes, gently brushing across Tsunade's smooth cheeks, leaving a faint tear stain, which made people feel heartache. Tears dripped from her chin, and drops of tears blended into the soil and disappeared, leaving only a little bit of moisture. But the scarred heart seemed to have added another scar at this moment, which was difficult to heal. I am Tsunade, the current director of Kiba Hospital and the commander-in-chief of the Woodleaf Medical Force. Of course, you don't need to remember that I have such an identity. Here, I only have one identity, and that is your sensei. You are all ninjas with medical ninja talent that I have found from the new ninjas in the past 2 years. In the next period of time, you will receive a training plan designated by me to train you to become a truly qualified medical ninja. If I feel that the best among you is to my liking, I may accept him or her as my official disciple. Looking at the hundreds of young ninjas standing in front of her, Tsunade said to them in a very heroic manner. Behind Tsunade stood Shizune, who had always been Tsunade's little follower, and Shina Kushina, who had studied under Tsunade for a while. Because Tsunade and Jiraiya's speed was too fast, Shizune didn't follow Jiraiya and Tsunade to participate in the welcome ceremony for Tsunade's return at the Woodleaf Gate. After arriving at Woodleaf, Shizune basically lived in seclusion to take care of Tsunade's life. This was the first time she appeared in front of so many people. Although she forced herself to be calm, after all, she was still young, and her psychological quality was not so good. She couldn't help but blush with excitement. Compared to Shizune, Shina Kushina, who had red hair and looked equally heroic, seemed to be more at ease. Over the years, as her injured body slowly recovered and Watergate's power continued to expand, Shina Kushina also slowly appeared in the public eye. Watergate naturally had unconditional trust in his wife, and many things were slowly delegated to Shina Kushina. One of the executors of the plan to cultivate a new type of medical ninja was also designated as Shina Kushina, who had a certain understanding of medical ninjutsu. Hearing Tsunade's promise to accept a disciple, the young ninjas standing below immediately became excited. Almost everyone standing here knew something about Woodleaf's medical system, and as the leader of Woodleaf's medical industry, Tsunade's deeds were naturally known by these children. If she could become the disciple of such a great person, wouldn't her future be limitless? Standing in the crowd, Haruno Sakura, Yamanaka Ino, and Hyuga Hinata's eyes also lit up at this moment. Sakura was selected as one of the trainee medical ninja because of her meticulous control of chakra. Yamanaka Ino was extremely strong because of the Yamanaka family's secret technique, and also qualified to become a medical ninja. Hinata was even more so. The Byakugan itself was a medical artifact. Even experienced medical ninja couldn't identify the meridians and acupuncture points. As newly graduated genin, all 3 children became members of Woodleaf's medical ninja training program. Seeing that the children in front of her were all excited, Tsunade also turned to look at Shizune standing behind her. Shizune also understood Tsunade's meaning and stepped forward a few steps to the group of ninjas standing below the stage and said, "Everyone, quiet down, I have something to announce." You have all passed the test of control of chakra and spiritual strength, so I will now announce what the first assessment is for you. Shizun said, and with a wave of her hand, the ninjas belonging to Kiba Hospital standing on both sides took a scroll and distributed it to each ninja standing below. As we all know, medical ninjutsu is actually a ninjutsu system that uses various forms of stimulation to make the cells of the human body perform various functions. As the foundation of all medical ninjutsu, the cultivation method of healing technique is recorded in detail in the scroll in your hands. Every medical ninja should not be a mass-produced healing machine, but a qualified ninja with their own opinions and thoughts. Therefore, your first assessment is to learn the healing technique recorded in the scroll in your hands and apply it to living body healing. Anyone who can pass this assessment will have the opportunity to receive more professional medical ninja guidance. Everyone, is it clear? In the face of Shizun's sudden question, whether they were ignorant or really understood, they all answered with a loud, yes. Tsunade nodded and left the huge classroom with Shina Kushina, Shizun, and a group of medical ninjas belonging to Kiba Hospital, leaving only the genin who were either sad or excited. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.